We were on a road trip, me and my fiancée, just cruising down the highway. It was getting late, and we decided to stop at this small, rundown motel we spotted. It looked deserted, but we were too tired to keep driving. The motel clerk seemed off, this uneasy vibe about him. He gave us a room key without much conversation, just this cold, distant stare. I didn't like it, but I brushed it off, thinking maybe he was just tired or had a bad day. As we settled in the room, things felt eerie. The place had this musty smell, and the flickering lights made it feel like something out of a horror movie. My fiancée laughed it off, saying it had a certain charm, but I couldn't shake off this feeling of discomfort. Later that night, I woke up to this strange noise outside our window. I peeked through the curtains and saw this man standing in the shadows, staring at our room. It sent shivers down my spine, this feeling of being watched by a complete stranger in the middle of nowhere. I nudged my fiancée awake, whispering about the man outside. He went to check, but when he looked out, there was no one there. I felt this overwhelming fear, this sense of someone lurking just beyond our sight. We tried to go back to sleep, but I couldn't shake off this feeling of dread. It felt wrong, this strange man watching us in the dead of night. The next morning, we mentioned it to the motel clerk, but he brushed it off, saying it must have been a misunderstanding. He seemed dismissive, like he didn't want to talk about it. We decided to stay another night, thinking maybe it was just our imagination playing tricks on us. But that night, it happened again. I woke up to that same noise outside the window. I mustered the courage to look, and there he was, that man, staring directly at us. I screamed for my fiancé, and he rushed to the window, but the man was gone again. I felt this overwhelming panic, this fear that something sinister was happening. We packed our things immediately, not wanting to stay another second in that place. As we were leaving, I saw the motel clerk talking to the man outside, this eerie exchange that sent chills down my spine. We drove off, feeling this sense of relief, but I couldn't shake off the fear from that encounter. I felt like that man was still watching us, following us somehow. We stopped at a diner to grab a bite, trying to shake off the unease. But as we left, I saw him again, that man, standing across the street, staring at us with this menacing look. It was terrifying, this feeling of being targeted by a stranger we encountered at that creepy motel. We tried to lose him by taking different routes, but he kept appearing, always watching us from a distance. It felt like he was following us, this relentless pursuit that sent waves of terror through me. I called the police, but without evidence of any crime, there wasn't much they could do. We felt trapped, this feeling of being stalked by someone who seemed to have ill intentions. We decided to drive straight to a busy area, hoping to lose him in the crowd. It seemed to work for a while, but then I saw him again, this time right behind us in traffic. I felt this overwhelming sense of dread, this fear that he wouldn't stop following us. We made a sudden turn, trying to lose him, but it was no use. He kept following, this relentless pursuit that felt like a nightmare. I was terrified, not knowing what he wanted or why he was fixated on us. We finally reached a police station, rushing inside for help. The man didn't follow us inside, disappearing into the streets. I felt this immense relief, but the fear still lingered, this feeling of being targeted and hunted by a stranger. The police took our statement, but without much to go on, they couldn't do much. I felt this overwhelming sense of vulnerability, this fear that he might appear again at any moment. We changed our plans, trying to avoid the areas we had been to before. But I couldn't shake off this fear that he was still out there, somewhere, watching and waiting. I'm this guy who loves adventure, right? So, I decide to go ice climbing in Jasper, Canada. The frozen cliffs, the crisp air, it seemed like the perfect challenge. But what started as an adrenaline-fueled escapade turned into a nightmarish ordeal. I hit the ice with my gear, ready for the climb. Jasper was this breathtaking wilderness, and the frozen formations looked like nature's masterpiece. As I began scaling the icy heights, I noticed something off. The roots were messed up, like someone had deliberately sabotaged them. I shrugged it off at first, thinking maybe it was just the unpredictable nature of the frozen terrain. But as I climbed higher, the sabotage became more apparent. The ice picks couldn't find a grip, and the footholds were precarious at best. It was like someone wanted to turn my adventure into a death trap. I pressed on, determined to conquer the challenge. But then, I spotted them, a rival group of climbers, smirking from a distance. It wasn't just about nature being tricky, they were deliberately making it harder for me. The tension on the icy cliffs grew thicker than the freezing air. As night fell, the temperature plummeted, and the wind howled through the frozen peaks. I knew I had to confront the rival climbers, figure out what their deal was. It wasn't just about the climb anymore, it was about survival on the frozen cliffs. I approached them, asking why they were sabotaging the routes. They laughed it off, claiming it was all part of the thrill. But their eyes told a different story, a dark intention that sent shivers down my spine. It wasn't a friendly rivalry, it was a dangerous game they were playing. The confrontation escalated. Words turned into threats, and suddenly, it was a chilling showdown on the icy heights. They accused me of invading their territory, but this was Jasper, the gray outdoors meant for everyone. The frozen cliffs became a battlefield for egos, and I found myself in the middle of it. I tried reasoning with them, explaining that we could share the climbs, enjoy the challenge together. But they weren't having it. Their hostility escalated, and the night on the icy peaks turned into a fight for survival. I knew I had to get out of there. I climbed down as fast as I could, the frozen wind biting into my bones. They pursued, their shouts echoing in the frozen night. Fear gripped me as I descended, the sabotage turning the adventure into a perilous escape. The frozen cliffs, once a majestic playground, became a haunting battleground. I reached the base, breathless and battered. I reported the incident to the authorities, but the rival climbers vanished into the frozen wilderness. So, I'm an artist, right? I got this brilliant idea for an installation on a Malibu beach. Figured the ocean breeze and all would be perfect for my masterpiece. Little did I know, my brilliant idea would lead me straight into a nightmare. I chose this secluded spot, waves crashing, sun setting, the whole picturesque deal. There I was, lugging my art supplies, when I saw them. A group of people. At first, I thought, cool, beachgoers like me. But no, they were up to something, and it wasn't sandcastles. As I set up my installation, I overheard snippets of their conversation. Something about a hidden stash, maybe illegal. I wasn't exactly eavesdropping, but when you're the only one around, you can't help but catch some deets. That's when it hit me. I'd stumbled onto something I shouldn't have. These guys were bad news, and they saw me. Now, I ain't no hero. I just wanted to create my masterpiece in peace. But these guys, they weren't having it. As darkness crept in, my artistic endeavor turned into a race against time. They started heading my way, and let me tell you, my heart was pounding louder than the waves. I didn't sign up for a thriller movie, but life had other plans. Frantically, I continued my artwork, hoping they'd overlook me as just some eccentric artist doing their thing. But no, they approached, and the vibe shifted from awkward to downright sinister. I felt eyes on me, judging every brushstroke. I tried to keep it together, focus on my art, but it felt like a staring contest I never signed up for. They were whispering now, probably debating whether to kick me off the beach or worse. I mean, who knew what these guys were capable of? Then, they pulled out flashlights. I couldn't see their faces, just shadows and glints from the beams. That's when I realized my masterpiece wasn't going to save me. I was just a witness stumbling onto their secret, and they weren't about to let that slide. In the midst of their whispers, I gathered my courage, packed up my stuff, and tried to act chill. You know, play it off like I was done with my artsy thing, hoping they'd buy it. But the tension, man, it was thick enough to cut with a palette knife. Just as I thought they might let me off with a stern warning, one of them stepped forward. The flashlight illuminated his face, and the expression, pure malice. He muttered something about secrets and consequences. My heart sank. This was going south real quick. I bolted, leaving my half-finished masterpiece behind. Running on the sand, stumbling over my own feet, I could hear them behind me. The waves crashed louder than my footsteps, but theirs were relentless, closing in. My car, parked not far from the beach, became my lifeline. I sprinted, adrenaline pumping, and jumped in. I peeled out of there faster than I knew my old car could handle. Glancing back, I saw them standing on the beach, watching me escape. I reported what happened to the authorities, but let's be real, I didn't have much to offer. They were just shadows in the night, faces hidden, and my masterpiece became a sacrifice to some dark secret. Ever since that night, I can't look at my art the same way. The beach, once a canvas for my creativity, became a haunting reminder of the thin line between artistry and survival. So, there I was, just a regular firefighter in this small southwest town, you know, doing my job. But things got weird real quick, and I found myself in the middle of something I never signed up for. It all started with a string of fires, one after the other. At first, we thought it was just bad luck, accidents maybe. But as the flames kept devouring buildings, a pattern emerged. Too many fires in too short a time span for comfort. As the town's firefighters, we were stretched thin, trying to contain the blazes. The whole community was on edge, wondering when the next fire would break out. People were losing their homes, their businesses. It was heartbreaking. But what struck me was the odd locations of the fires, almost like someone had a twisted plan. I started looking into it, asking questions around town, and that's when I felt the tension. People clammed up, avoided eye contact. It was like they were hiding something, scared to talk. But I was determined. I had to find out who or what was behind the fires. One night, after another round of battling flames, I overheard a conversation at the local diner. Some shady characters, talking in hushed tones about the fires, about how it was all part of some grand plan. My curiosity went into overdrive, and I decided to dig deeper. I snooped around, gathering bits and pieces. It seemed there was a conspiracy at play, a group orchestrating the fires for some sinister purpose. The more I uncovered, the more danger I realized the town was in. It wasn't just about structures burning down, it was about the very fabric of the community being threatened. I brought my findings to the chief, thinking he'd have my back. But he brushed it off, said I was reading too much into things. That didn't sit right with me. It felt like someone within the department was involved, pulling strings to keep the truth hidden. I decided to go rogue, investigate on my own. The fires continued, each one escalating in scale. It was like the town was descending into chaos, and I was the only one who saw the bigger picture. Late one night, I caught wind of a secret meeting in an abandoned warehouse. I slinked in, keeping to the shadows. What I witnessed, it chilled me to the bone. The conspirators, faces masked, discussing the next target, the next fire to ignite. It was like a well-organized operation, and I was the only one onto them. I recorded the meeting on my phone, thinking I had the evidence to blow the whole thing wide open. But as I left the warehouse, I felt eyes on me. Footsteps echoing in the darkness. I quickened my pace, heart pounding. It was like a game of cat and mouse, and I was the mouse. The next day, I handed the evidence to a local journalist, someone I trusted to expose the truth. But before the story could break, my world turned upside down. My house went up in flames, the very flames I had fought against. It was a message, a warning to back off. I barely escaped with my life, coughing up smoke as the fire consumed everything I owned. The town, once my home, now felt like a hostile territory. The conspiracy, the fires, it was like a cancer eating away at the place I swore to protect. I went into hiding, fearing for my life. The journalists, they went silent too, probably scared off by the same threats. The town, unaware of the conspiracy brewing within its borders, continued to burn. It was like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. As I laid low, I received a message, a chilling warning that my investigations had consequences. The conspirators were closing in, and I was a loose end that needed tying. I couldn't trust anyone, not even my fellow firefighters. The very people I had worked beside were potentially involved in this twisted plot. The town descended further into chaos. The fires raged on, consuming everything in their path. It felt like the very community I had sworn to protect was turning against me. Paranoia gnawed at me every waking moment. I had to leave, escape the town that had become a powder keg of conspiracy and danger. The southwest town, once a haven, now felt like a trap. The fires, the corruption, they were inextricably linked, threatening to consume everything in their path. It was last summer, me and Jenna decided to escape the city craziness and found this remote beach. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow on the sand. We thought we'd have the place to ourselves for some alone time. The waves crashing, the distant sounds of seagulls, everything seemed peaceful. We laid down our blanket and opened a bottle of wine. The sea breeze was cool, and the smell of salt hung in the air. We laughed, talked, and lost track of time. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we noticed a figure down the beach, standing in the shadows. It was a guy, just staring at us. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he was lost or something. But he kept standing there, not moving. It felt weird, you know? I whispered to Jenna about the guy, and she glanced over. We both got a bit uneasy, but we figured he'd leave eventually. Time passed, and he didn't budge. We decided to pack up and head back to the car. But as we started walking, I could feel his eyes on us. We quickened our pace, but he kept a steady distance. I turned around, and there he was, trailing us. We reached the car, locked ourselves in, but he just stood there, staring. Jenna tried to call someone, but there was no signal. Panic set in. We decided to drive away, thinking we could shake him off. We sped through winding roads, but he followed, always a few cars behind. Finally, we reached a gas station and rushed inside. We told the cashier about the guy, and he agreed to help. The stranger parked nearby and just sat in his car, watching. The cashier called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. Shaken, we stayed at the gas station until morning. The police took our statement and assured us they'd look into it. We went home, hoping it was over. But days turned into weeks, and the guy started showing up everywhere, near our apartment, at the grocery store, even outside my workplace. We got security cameras, changed locks, and filed restraining orders, but he persisted. Jenna couldn't sleep, neither could I. Every shadow felt like him watching. It became a living nightmare, never knowing when he'd appear next. The police couldn't do much. They said without direct threats, it was hard to build a case. We felt helpless, constantly looking over our shoulders. Jenna's smile faded, replaced by fear. Our relationship strained under the constant stress. One day, he approached us in broad daylight. He was calm, said he just wanted to talk. I called the police, but he disappeared before they arrived. The next night, our apartment was broken into. Nothing stolen, but a chilling note left on the kitchen table. I'm always watching. We decided to leave the city, start fresh somewhere he wouldn't find us. I'd been looking forward to this getaway for ages. A remote cabin nestled deep in the woods, the perfect place to find solitude and finally start writing that novel I've been dreaming of. The house seemed friendly, the reviews promising seclusion and tranquility. As I arrived, the cabin appeared just as picturesque as the photos portrayed. The air was crisp, the forest around me alive with the sounds of nature. I unpacked, settled in, and as the day waned, I sat down at the old wooden desk, ready to bring my story to life. But soon, peculiar things began to happen. Footsteps outside my window when I knew I was alone. The sensation of being watched, an inexplicable unease that settled in. I brushed it off as nerves, the unfamiliarity of being in such a remote place. Nightfall brought a sense of isolation. The silence of the woods was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl. It was serene, yet somehow ominous. As I sat at the desk, typing away, a chill ran down my spine. I glanced over my shoulder, expecting to see nothing but darkness outside. But through the window, I caught a glimpse of someone or something moving among the trees. My heart raced as I blinked, thinking it was a trick of the shadows. Yet, when I looked again, a figure stood there, just beyond the reach of the cabin's light. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Fear gripped me, but I told myself it was my imagination, that it was probably a trick of the light. I forced myself to focus on my work, hoping it was just the stress of being in an unfamiliar place. But then came the sound of footsteps on the porch, slow and deliberate. My heart raced as I held my breath, trying to convince myself that it was just a stray animal or the wind. I hesitated, debating whether to investigate or hide. I summoned all my courage and slowly made my way to the door, trying to ignore the pounding of my heart. I peeked through the peephole, but there was nothing there. Just the darkness of the night. Relief washed over me until I heard a soft whisper, barely audible. My blood turned to ice. I strained to listen, my heart thundering in my chest. The voice, almost ghostly, muttered something incomprehensible, chilling me to the bone. I stepped back, my breath shallow, my mind racing. I couldn't stay there, not with this unnerving presence. I locked the door and drew the curtains, trying to ward off the unease settling in. But the night dragged on, the hours ticking by slowly. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside sent shivers down my spine. I felt like a character in a horror movie, trapped and vulnerable. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, that I was letting my imagination run wild. But as I glanced at the window, I saw a face pressed against the glass, a pale, featureless visage, staring directly at me. I screamed, my body trembling, and backed away. There was no mistaking it this time. Someone was there, watching me, their eyes fixed on mine. The figure slowly faded into the darkness, leaving me terrified and alone. I called the police, my voice trembling as I explained the chilling encounter. But when they arrived, they found no one around. They assured me it was probably just a prank or some wildlife roaming the woods. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, the sense of dread that lingered long after they left. I packed my things and left that cabin in a rush, never looking back. To this day, I can't explain what I saw or who or what it was. That experience haunted me. I was excited about attending this big conference, looking forward to networking and learning new things. But when I arrived at the hotel, I found out I had a roommate assigned to me. I didn't mind sharing, thinking it might be a good chance to meet someone new. At first, everything seemed fine. We exchanged polite greetings, and I thought it would be okay. But as the days went by, my roommate's behavior started to change. She became increasingly aggressive and confrontational over trivial things, like the room temperature or the TV volume. I tried to diffuse the tension, thinking maybe she was just stressed or having a bad day. But her behavior only escalated. She'd snap at me for no reason, making me feel uncomfortable and on edge in my own space. I couldn't understand what I did to upset her. I tried to be accommodating, adjusting to her requests, but nothing seemed to make her happy. It was like walking on eggshells around her. One night, I came back to the room late after attending a networking event. She was sitting on her bed, glaring at me with this intense, unsettling look in her eyes. I felt this surge of fear, this feeling that something wasn't right. I tried to avoid confrontation, quickly getting ready for bed and keeping to myself. But she started making snide remarks, saying things that felt threatening and hostile. It sent shivers down my spine. I didn't want to provoke her, so I kept quiet, trying to ignore her hostile behavior. But it was getting harder to ignore, this feeling of being trapped in a confined space with someone who seemed to despise me for no reason. The tension in the room was palpable. I couldn't sleep, feeling this sense of unease, this fear that something might happen while I was vulnerable and asleep. I decided to talk to the hotel staff about changing rooms, explaining the situation. They seemed sympathetic but said they were fully booked and couldn't accommodate the request. I felt this overwhelming sense of dread, this feeling of being stuck in a situation that was turning increasingly hostile. I considered leaving the conference early, but I didn't want to miss out on the opportunity. I tried to spend as much time out of the room as possible, attending workshops and networking events, just to avoid being around her. But every time I returned, the atmosphere in the room felt suffocating, this sense of being watched and targeted. One evening, she confronted me in the room, yelling and accusing me of things I didn't do. Her voice was filled with rage, and I felt this surge of panic, not knowing how to handle the situation. I tried to reason with her, to calm her down, but it only made her more aggressive. She started getting physical, blocking my way and intimidating me. I felt this overwhelming fear, this feeling of being threatened and unsafe. I managed to slip past her and rush to the hotel lobby, seeking help from the staff. They intervened and separated us, but I was shaking, feeling this trauma from the confrontation. They moved me to a different room, away from her. But the fear lingered, this feeling of being targeted and intimidated by someone I barely knew. I worked as a dispatcher for the local snowplow service in this mountain town. It was a regular gig, coordinating the plows during heavy snowfall. One winter, though, things got strange. It started when I noticed the plows weren't following their usual routes. They were clearing paths to specific locations, and it seemed intentional. I thought it was odd but brushed it off as maybe a change in strategy. The town was small, and any change was noticeable. The more I observed, the more suspicious it got. The plows weren't just clearing roads, they were creating pathways to isolated spots, places rarely visited even during regular times. It gave me an eerie feeling, like something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. One day, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to investigate. I waited until the plows went out, then tracked their movements on the map. The paths they were clearing formed a pattern, leading to a secluded area deep in the mountains. It was a place rarely ventured into, especially during winter. I contacted a buddy who worked on one of the plows, trying to get some info. He was hesitant, but he mentioned whispers among the crew about getting extra cash for these secret plowing jobs. I pressed him, but he clammed up, afraid of getting involved. I couldn't shake the feeling that something nefarious was going on. Late one night, I decided to drive up to that secluded area. The snow was thick, making the journey slow and treacherous. My headlights cut through the darkness, revealing the snow-covered landscape. As I approached the destination, I saw figures moving in the shadows. My heart raced, and I parked the car a safe distance away, watching from the shadows. The plows had created a path leading to a large, abandoned building, a place that had no business being accessible in the middle of winter. I stayed hidden, trying to make sense of what was happening. People emerged from the building, carrying bags and exchanging hushed conversations. It hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about plowing paths, it was a cover for something illegal. I snapped a few pictures with my phone, capturing the clandestine activities. My hands trembled as I watched, realizing I was witnessing a plot unfolding right in our quiet mountain town. Fear crept in as I pondered what kind of operation required such secrecy and precision. As I backed away, my foot hit a loose rock, causing a small noise. The figures turned towards me, and panic set in. I sprinted back to my car, heart pounding, the cold air burning my lungs. I drove back to town in a frenzy, fearing that I had become an unintended witness. Once I got home, I debated whether to go to the police. The fear of retribution gnawed at me, but the sense of responsibility won. I handed over the evidence and my account of the night. The police assured me they would investigate, but the tension in the air grew thick. Days later, news broke about a major drug operation busted in the mountains. The plowed paths led to a hidden processing facility, a hub for illegal activities. The arrests sent shockwaves through the town, revealing a dark underbelly that had been thriving beneath the snowy surface. The plow crew, unknowingly involved in the operation, was questioned and, to some extent, cleared of intentional involvement. It turned out the plow drivers were just following orders, unaware of the illicit activities happening in the remote building. The bust changed the town forever. It exposed the vulnerabilities beneath the pristine snow and shattered the illusion of a peaceful mountain community. Even as life returned to normal, the memory of that winter lingered, a chilling reminder that danger could hide in the most unexpected places. So me and the guys, we're into this urban exploring thing, you know? Find an old place, sneak in, see what's left behind. This time, we hit up this abandoned asylum in Mississippi. Creepy as hell from the outside, broken windows, overgrown weeds, the works. We're thinking it's just a cool place to poke around, snap some pics. But man, the moment we step inside, this place hits different. Dark, musty, like the air's thicker than it should be. First thing we notice, those old hospital beds, rusted and creaking. We're cracking jokes, trying to keep it light, but something feels off. Like, there's this heaviness hanging in the air, and it's not just the dust. We find these old patient records scattered around, names, dates, all that. Place was like a time capsule, frozen in some twisted era. Then, we stumble onto this room. Medical equipment everywhere, like a mad scientist's lab. We find these journals, and they're talking about experiments, messed up stuff. Doctor's name was Mitchell, and he was doing things to patients that should have never happened. Reading through those journals, it's like peeling back layers of horror. Shock therapy, experimental drugs, lobotomies, you name it. Patients weren't just patients, They were guinea pigs in this twisted lab of despair. We're freaking out, realizing we've stepped into a nightmare. Trying to wrap our heads around it, but there's no making sense of the madness. These poor souls were subjected to the kind of stuff you'd see in a horror movie. Pictures of the patients, their eyes hollow, expressions vacant. It's like you can feel the pain etched into their faces. We're taking photos, documenting every inch of that hellhole, feeling like we've uncovered some dark secret. As we're about to bail and report this insanity to the cops, that's when it gets even crazier. We hear footsteps, echoes down the hall. At first, we think it's just the wind playing tricks, but it's rhythmic, deliberate. Suddenly, this figure appears at the end of the corridor. A guy in a lab coat, disheveled, like he just stepped out of a time machine from the twisted past of this asylum. Dr. Mitchell, or his ghost, or whatever, staring right at us. We freeze, like deer caught in headlights. Dude starts walking towards us, slow, deliberate. We're inching back, heartbeats pounding in our ears. And then, he speaks, this raspy voice like it's been drowned in suffering. Leave, he says, just that one word, but it echoes in the silence like a command from the depths of insanity. We don't need to be told twice. We book it out of there, adrenaline pumping, legs moving faster than they ever have. Once we're out, we call the cops, spill everything. They show up, and we guide them through the asylum, show them the horrors we found. They're in shock, too, faces pale, probably not expecting this level of messed up. We hand over our pics, journals, everything. Cops thank us, but you can see it in their eyes, like they can't believe what they're seeing. They assure us they'll investigate, but we're left standing there, minds buzzing with the things we've witnessed. Days later, news breaks out. The police shut down the place, launch a full investigation. Turns out, Dr. Mitchell wasn't just some madman in our pics, he was real, and he did all those sick experiments. Place gets sealed off, like a dark stain wiped clean. We did our part, right? Shared the truth, exposed the horror. I work at a big supermarket, stocking shelves and helping customers find what they need. It's usually a pretty ordinary job, but lately, things have been feeling off. It all started a few weeks ago when I noticed my manager, Mr. Thompson, acting strangely around me. At first, I thought maybe I was just being paranoid, but the more I paid attention, the more I realized that something wasn't right. He would always seem to be hovering around me, watching me as I worked, his eyes following my every move. And whenever I would catch him staring, he would quickly look away, like he was trying to hide something. At first, I tried to brush it off, telling myself that maybe he was just making sure I was doing my job properly. But as time went on, his behavior only seemed to get worse. He started showing up at my register more often, asking me questions about my personal life and making comments that made me uncomfortable. And whenever I tried to avoid him, he would always find a way to corner me, like he was deliberately trying to make me feel trapped. I started to feel like I was being watched all the time, like Mr. Thompson was always lurking just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And no matter how hard I tried to shake the feeling, I couldn't escape the sense of unease that settled over me like a dark cloud. Then, one day, I found something that confirmed my worst fears, a hidden camera tucked away in the corner of the break room, pointed directly at my locker. My heart raced as I realized that Mr. Thompson had been spying on me, watching my every move when I thought I was alone. I felt sick to my stomach as I realized just how much he must know about me, about my habits and routines. And the thought of him watching me, invading my privacy like that, filled me with a sense of horror and violation that I couldn't shake. I knew that I had to do something, that I couldn't just let Mr. Thompson get away with what he had done. But I also knew that confronting him would be dangerous, that he was capable of anything to protect his secrets. So, I started keeping a close eye on him, watching for any signs that he might be planning something. And sure enough, it wasn't long before I started noticing him lurking around the store after hours, long after everyone else had gone home. I knew that I had to be careful, that confronting him alone would be too risky. So, I reached out to a coworker that I trusted, someone who I knew would have my back. Together, we started gathering evidence, documenting Mr. Thompson's suspicious behavior and collecting testimony from other employees who had witnessed his misconduct. And finally, we took our case to the higher-ups, demanding that action be taken to hold Mr. Thompson accountable for his actions. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I felt like giving up. But in the end, our hard work paid off, and Mr. Thompson was fired from his position at the supermarket. But even though he was gone, I couldn't shake the feeling of fear and unease that lingered in the air. I knew that he was still out there, somewhere, watching and waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. And no matter how hard I tried to move on, I couldn't escape the sense of dread that followed me wherever I went. I decided to embark on a solo trek through the rural countryside, seeking adventure and solitude. The open road stretched out before me, promising freedom and exploration. With my backpack slung over my shoulders, I set out, eager to immerse myself in nature's embrace. The journey was peaceful at first, with nothing but the sound of my footsteps echoing through the quiet countryside. But as I neared a small town, a sense of unease settled over me. The air seemed to grow heavier, and the once welcoming landscape took on a sinister edge. As I entered the town, I was met with suspicious glances from the locals. They eyed me warily, as if I were an intruder in their midst. I tried to shrug it off, chalking it up to small-town paranoia, but the feeling lingered, gnawing at the edges of my mind. I approached a small general store to resupply, hoping to restock my provisions and continue on my journey. But the shopkeeper's demeanor sent a shiver down my spine. His eyes bore into mine, cold and calculating, as if he could see right through me. I brushed off his hostility and gathered what I needed, eager to leave the town behind. But as I turned to go, I overheard snippets of conversation from the locals gathered outside. They spoke in hushed tones, their words laced with fear and suspicion. I couldn't make out much, but phrases like outsider and stay away sent a chill down my spine. It was as if they were warning me to leave, to flee before it was too late. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more sinister at play. As I made my way out of town, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow seemed to conceal unseen eyes, following my every move. I quickened my pace, eager to put distance between myself and the eerie town. But no matter how far I walked, the feeling of unease only grew stronger. It was as if the very land itself was warning me to turn back, to retreat from whatever darkness lurked ahead. But I pressed on, driven by a stubborn determination to uncover the truth. As night fell, I found myself deep in the heart of the countryside, surrounded by dense forests and looming mountains. The darkness was suffocating, swallowing me whole as I stumbled through the wilderness. Suddenly, I heard it, the sound of footsteps echoing through the night. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to listen, my senses on high alert. Someone or something was following me, lurking in the shadows just out of sight. I tried to shake off the feeling of dread that gripped me, but it clung to me like a second skin. With each step, the footsteps grew louder, closer, until I could almost feel the presence of whoever or whatever was stalking me. I knew I had to act fast if I wanted to escape whatever danger lurked in the darkness. Drawing upon every ounce of survival instinct I possessed, I veered off the trail and into the underbrush, hoping to lose my pursuer in the maze of trees. But whoever or whatever was following me was relentless. Their footsteps echoed through the forest, drawing closer with each passing moment. Panic surged through me as I realized I was running out of options, running out of time. I pushed myself to the limit, sprinting through the forest with reckless abandon. Branches slapped against my face, thorns tore at my clothes, but I didn't dare slow down. I had to keep moving, had to find a way to escape the nightmare closing in around me. Just when I thought I couldn't go on any longer, I stumbled upon a clearing in the forest. The moon cast its pale light upon the scene, illuminating the way ahead. With a burst of adrenaline-fueled energy, I raced towards the safety of the open space, praying for deliverance from the horrors that pursued me. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the chase was over. The footsteps faded into the distance, swallowed up by the darkness of the night. I collapsed onto the forest floor, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. As dawn broke on the horizon, I emerged from the forest, battered and bruised but alive. The small town lay behind me, a distant memory overshadowed by the terror of the night. I vowed never to return, never to set foot in that cursed place again. One day, I found myself in a situation that I never could have imagined. It started out like any other hike. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and I was enjoying the solitude of the wilderness. But as I ventured further into the forest, I realized that I had lost track of the trail. Panic began to rise in my chest as I searched desperately for any signs of civilization. I tried to retrace my steps, but the dense foliage made it difficult to navigate. Just when I was starting to lose hope, I heard voices up ahead. Relieved, I pushed through the underbrush and stumbled upon another hiker family walking past. With a sense of relief, I approached them and asked for directions. But when I told them where I was trying to go, their expressions turned to confusion. They exchanged a glance before telling me that I was over 500 miles away from where I had started. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How could I have gotten so lost? Fear gripped me as I realized that I had no idea how to get back to civilization. I was stranded in the wilderness, miles from home, with no way to find my way back. The hiker family offered to help me, but I knew that it was impossible to cover such a distance on foot. Desperate, I thanked them for their offer and watched as they disappeared into the forest. Alone once again, I felt a wave of hopelessness wash over me. I had no food, no water, and no way to navigate my way out of the wilderness. As night fell, the forest grew dark and silent around me. Every rustle of the leaves and snap of a twig sent shivers down my spine. I tried to sleep, but fear kept me awake, my mind racing with thoughts of what could be lurking in the darkness. Hours passed, but it felt like an eternity. I was exhausted and terrified, and I knew that I couldn't stay in the wilderness much longer. With a sense of determination, I set out once again, hoping to find some clue that would lead me back to civilization. But as I stumbled through the forest, the trees seemed to close in around me, their branches reaching out like grasping hands. Just when I was about to give up hope, I heard the sound of rushing water up ahead. With renewed energy, I pushed through the underbrush and stumbled upon a river. Relief flooded through me as I realized that this could be my ticket out of the wilderness. I followed the riverbank, hoping that it would lead me to safety. But as I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every shadow seemed to conceal some hidden threat, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Just when I was starting to feel like I was making progress, I heard the sound of voices up ahead. With a sense of relief, I hurried towards the sound, hoping that it was a sign of civilization. But as I emerged from the trees, my heart sank. It was the same hiker family that I had encountered earlier. They looked at me with concern, asking if I was lost. I tried to explain my situation, but they just shook their heads in disbelief. They told me that they had been walking for hours and hadn't seen anyone else on the trail. Panic surged through me as I realized that I was truly alone in the wilderness. I had no idea how I had gotten so turned around, and I had no idea how to find my way back home. I remember passing out and waking up in a hospital bed in my local hospital. I was out on my early morning milk delivery route, just like any other day. The roads were quiet. I liked the peacefulness of the early hours. It gave me a chance to gather my thoughts before the day began. As I was driving down a deserted stretch of road, I saw another car up ahead. It was an odd place to see another vehicle at that time of day, but I didn't think much of it at first. As I got closer, I saw that the car was pulled over to the side, and a man and a woman were standing next to it. I slowed down to see if they needed help, but as I got closer, I felt a shiver run down my spine. There was something about the way they were standing that didn't sit right with me. They were both wearing dark clothes, and their expressions were cold and unreadable. I rolled down my window and asked if everything was okay. The man spoke in a low, gravelly voice, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. He said they were fine and didn't need any help, but his eyes never left mine. I tried to brush it off and went to continue on my way, but as I pulled ahead, I saw them get back into their car and start to follow me. I could feel a surge of panic rising in my chest. I tried to tell myself that I was just being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I made a few turns to see if they would keep following me, and sure enough, they did. My heart was racing, and I knew I had to find a way to lose them. I took a few more turns, hoping to shake them off, but no matter what I did, they stayed right behind me. I could feel the weight of their gaze on me, and I knew that I was in serious trouble. I tried to keep calm and focused on finding a way out of the situation, but the feeling of unease in the pit of my stomach only grew stronger. As I made a sharp turn onto a side street, I saw a police car up ahead. I felt a wave of relief wash over me as I pulled up next to the officer and told him what had been happening. The odd pair's car slowed down as it passed us, and I could feel their eyes on me one last time before they disappeared into the early morning light. Alright, so there I was, thinking ice skating on a frozen river in Minneapolis would be a great idea. The ice seemed solid, the winter air crisp. Little did I know, this was going to turn into one heck of a perilous ordeal. I laced up my skates, gliding on the frozen river with the winter sun casting long shadows. It felt serene, the chill biting at my cheeks. But then, out of nowhere, this group of locals appeared. They didn't seem too thrilled about me being there, but I brushed it off, thinking they were just territorial about their icy turf. As I skated along, their glares followed me, turning the once serene atmosphere into a tense one. I tried to enjoy the winter outing, but their presence was like an unwelcome shadow on the ice. It became clear they weren't just minding their own business. I decided to skate away, thinking it would defuse the situation. But they pursued, their skates cutting through the frozen surface with an eerie sound. It was like a winter chase, the icy wind carrying their distant taunts. The river, once a winter playground, now felt like a frozen battleground. I picked up my pace, the ice cracking beneath me as I tried to escape their pursuit. Panic set in when I realized I was being herded into a more secluded part of the frozen river. The winter outing that started with a sense of freedom now felt like a trap closing in. As I reached a more isolated stretch, the group surrounded me. Their menacing stares and icy glares made it clear this confrontation was no accident. It was like I had stumbled into a territory dispute on the icy frontier of Minneapolis. Words were exchanged, and the tension grew. I tried to reason with them, explain I was just here for a bit of winter fun. But they weren't having it. The frozen river became a stage for a chilling confrontation, and the icy surface felt more treacherous beneath my skates. The leader of the group stepped forward, his breath visible in the freezing air. He made it clear they didn't want outsiders on their turf. It wasn't just about a friendly game of ice skating. It was a territorial clash on the frozen frontier of Minneapolis. Things escalated, and before I knew it, it turned physical. The frozen river became a battleground for a fight I never saw coming. I tried to hold my own, slipping and sliding on the ice as blows were exchanged. The winter air echoed with the sounds of the confrontation, the chill settling into my bones. I managed to break free, skating away from the group. But they weren't done. They pursued relentlessly, their anger driving them forward. It was a desperate attempt to escape this unexpected danger on the icy expanse. As I skated for my life, the distant lights of Minneapolis seemed like a distant beacon of safety. The icy surface beneath me became both an ally and a threat. I navigated the frozen river, the echoes of the confrontation fading into the winter night. Finally, I reached the edge of the river, the group still in the distance. I reported the terrifying encounter to the authorities, but the icy ordeal stayed with me. The winter outing that started with innocent fun became a harrowing tale of a confrontation on the frozen frontier of Minneapolis. The frozen river, once a symbol of winter joy, now held the memory of a perilous encounter. So, we're out in the icy waters off Greenland, just a bunch of guys trying to make a living by reeling in whatever the sea decides to throw at us. The weather's unforgiving, but it's just another day on the boat, you know? Little did we know, this would be more than just a routine fishing trip. We've been at it for hours, hauling in our catch, hands numb from the cold. That's when we start hearing these weird noises, like creaking and shuffling. I figure it's just the boat settling into the waves, but it doesn't take long for me to realize something's off. Real off. We search the boat, checking every nook and cranny, and that's when we find him, a guy huddled in a corner, looking like he just escaped the jaws of death. He's all wild-eyed, shivering like a leaf, muttering stuff we can't make sense of. Turns out, he's a stowaway, and he's brought a whole lot of crazy with him. The guy's a complete mess, babbling about some sinister plot or another. He's paranoid, like the walls are closing in on him. We try to calm him down, but it's like talking to a brick wall. He's convinced we're all part of some grand conspiracy against him. Night falls, and that's when things take a turn for the worse. We're out in the freezing darkness, surrounded by nothing but the howling wind and the unforgiving sea. The stowaway starts acting even more erratic, and I can feel the tension on the boat thickening. It's like we're caught in a storm, but the storm is within our own walls. Suddenly, the guy snaps. He's got this crazed look in his eyes, and before we can react, he pulls out a knife. The glint of the blade in the pale moonlight sends a chill down my spine. Panic sets in. We're trapped in the middle of the freezing ocean with a lunatic wielding a weapon. The captain tries to reason with him, but reason left the building ages ago. The stowaway lunges at the captain, and there's a struggle. I can't make out the details in the dark, but I hear grunts and curses, the sound of a desperate fight for survival. Then, the sickening thud. The captain collapses, clutching his side. Blood stains the icy deck. It's chaos. We're all yelling, scrambling to contain the situation. The stowaway stands there, panting, his eyes fixed on the havoc he's just unleashed. With the captain injured, the responsibility falls on us. We manage to overpower the stowaway, subduing him just long enough to tie him up. But the damage is done. Our captain is bleeding out, and the bitter cold is making everything worse. We radio for help, but the nearest vessel is hours away. The captain's groaning in pain, fading in and out of consciousness. We do what we can, applying makeshift bandages and trying to keep him warm. The stowaway, now bound and subdued, watches with a twisted satisfaction in his eyes. The hours crawl by, each minute feeling like an eternity. We're stuck in a nightmare, a freezing sea, a wounded captain, and a lunatic among us. The stowaway, now eerily calm, starts whispering cryptic nonsense, like he's possessed by some malevolent force. Just when we think we can't take it any longer, the distant hum of an approaching vessel breaks through the desolation. Relief washes over us, but it's tainted by the realization that this night will stay with us, like a shadow in the deep. As the rescue team takes over, we're left to process the madness that unfolded on that icy expanse. The stowaway is taken away, and we're left with questions that will haunt us. Why did this man snap? What demons were chasing him across the cold, unforgiving sea? We return to port, battered and scarred, forever changed by the horror that visited us in the Arctic darkness. Moving into the duplex was a big step for me. I was excited to have a place of my own, a quiet space where I could unwind after a long day at work. The neighborhood seemed nice enough, with its tree-lined streets and well-kept lawns. But as I settled into my new home, I started noticing strange things happening in the adjoining unit. At first, it was just little things, strange noises coming from the walls, lights flickering on and off at odd hours. I tried to brush it off as just the quirks of an old building, but the feeling of unease lingered. Then, one night, I heard the sound of someone moving around in the other unit. It was late, well past midnight, and I couldn't imagine why anyone would be up and about at that hour. I tried to ignore it and go back to sleep, but the noise persisted, growing louder and more urgent with each passing moment. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to investigate. I crept over to the door that connected our units and pressed my ear against it, listening intently for any clue as to what was happening on the other side. That's when I heard it, the sound of someone whispering in hushed tones, their voice tinged with fear and desperation. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but the tone sent a chill down my spine. I debated whether to knock on the door and see if everything was okay, but something held me back. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about my neighbor, something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. The next morning, I decided to do some digging into my neighbor's background, hoping to uncover some clue as to what was going on. But the more I searched, the less I found. It was like they didn't even exist, like they had just appeared out of thin air. I tried to talk to other neighbors about what I had heard, but they just shrugged it off and told me not to worry about it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong, that my neighbor was hiding something sinister behind closed doors. Then, one night, as I was lying in bed, I heard the sound of footsteps in the other unit. They were slow and deliberate, moving with purpose through the darkness. I strained to listen, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to make sense of what was happening. That's when I heard the sound of a door opening, followed by the unmistakable sound of someone crying out in pain. My blood ran cold as I realized that my neighbor was in trouble, that they needed help and I was the only one who could do something about it. I debated whether to call the police, but something held me back. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than met the eye, that involving the authorities would only make things worse. So, I made the decision to confront my neighbor myself. I knocked on their door, my heart pounding in my chest as I waited for them to answer. When they finally opened the door, their face was pale and drawn, their eyes wide with fear. I asked them if everything was okay, if there was anything I could do to help. But they just shook their head and told me to mind my own business, slamming the door in my face before I could say another word. I knew then that I had to do something, that I couldn't just sit back and do nothing while my neighbor suffered in silence. So, I started keeping a close eye on their comings and goings, hoping to catch a glimpse of what was really going on behind closed doors. What I saw chilled me to the bone. I watched as my neighbor came and went at odd hours of the night, always looking over their shoulder as if afraid of being followed. I watched as they carried strange packages into their unit, packages that I suspected held something far more sinister than just groceries or household items. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that my neighbor knew I was onto them and was biding their time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I tried to reach out for help, to tell someone about what I had seen and heard. But no one believed me, dismissing my fears as the product of an overactive imagination. In the end, I was left to face my neighbor alone, but just when I thought I was at my wit's end, a breakthrough came. One evening, as I was returning home from work, I noticed a commotion outside my neighbor's unit. Police cars were parked in front of the duplex, and officers were rushing in and out with a sense of urgency. I approached one of the officers and asked what was going on. He hesitated for a moment before telling me that they had received a tip about suspicious activity in the area and were conducting a search of the premises. My heart raced as I realized that this could be my chance to finally uncover the truth about my neighbor. I followed the officers into the duplex, my pulse quickening with each step. As they searched the unit next to mine, I waited anxiously for any sign of what they might find. And then, I heard the sound of someone shouting, followed by the unmistakable clink of handcuffs being snapped shut. I watched in disbelief as my neighbor was led out of the duplex in handcuffs, their face contorted with rage and fear. It turned out that they had been running a drug operation out of their unit, using the cover of the retirement community to avoid suspicion. As the truth came to light, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The mystery that had been plaguing me for weeks was finally solved, and I could rest easy knowing that my neighbor was no longer a threat to me or anyone else in the neighborhood. In the days that followed, life returned to normal in the duplex. The tension that had hung in the air like a dark cloud lifted, and I was able to settle into my new home without fear or suspicion. But the experience had changed me. I had seen firsthand the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of the seemingly normal world, and I knew that I could never look at my neighbors in quite the same way again. As I sat on my porch one evening, I couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude for the police officers who had intervened and brought an end to the nightmare that had been unfolding next door. I'm an ordinary guy, and spending quality time with my son is one of life's greatest pleasures. So, when we decided to go camping together in a remote area, I was looking forward to bonding with him and enjoying the great outdoors. We arrived at the campsite early in the afternoon, eager to set up our tent and start exploring the wilderness. Everything seemed normal at first. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, and the forest was alive with the sounds of nature. But as the afternoon turned into evening, things started to take a strange turn. As we sat around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and telling stories, we heard footsteps approaching from the darkness beyond the trees. At first, we assumed it was just other campers passing by. But then, out of the shadows emerged a group of people dressed in uniforms that resembled park ranger attire. They greeted us warmly and introduced themselves as park rangers, claiming they were patrolling the area to ensure everyone's safety. I found it odd that they were out so late, but I didn't think much of it at the time. As the night wore on, however, their behavior became increasingly strange. They lingered around our campsite, watching us with intense stares and whispering amongst themselves in hushed tones. I tried to brush off my unease, telling myself that I was just being paranoid. But as the hours passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Then, in the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of someone rummaging through our belongings outside the tent. Heart pounding, I woke my son and we listened in silence as the rustling grew louder. With trembling hands, I unzipped the tent and peered outside, expecting to see a wild animal or maybe even another camper. But what I saw chilled me to the bone. It was the group of people claiming to be park rangers, rifling through our bags and taking inventory of our belongings. When they noticed me watching, their expressions turned cold and hostile, sending a shiver down my spine. I demanded to know what they were doing, but they just laughed and told me to mind my own business. Fear and anger surged through me as I realized that these people were not who they claimed to be. Without another word, I grabbed my son's hand and we fled into the forest, our hearts pounding with adrenaline as we ran for our lives. I could hear the sound of footsteps behind us, growing louder with each passing moment. We stumbled through the darkness, branches scratching at our skin and roots tripping us up at every turn. But we refused to give up, pushing ourselves to keep going despite the overwhelming sense of terror. Finally, after what felt like hours of running, we stumbled upon a clearing in the forest. Gasping for breath, we collapsed onto the ground, our bodies shaking with exhaustion and fear. As we lay there, catching our breath, I knew that we had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. Those people in the woods were up to no good, and if we hadn't gotten away when we did, who knows what they would have done to us. For some context, I am a 34-year-old author from New York. Got this novel in mind, thought it'd be a breeze. Figured I'd do some research, get the vibe of this secluded Georgia town. Small, quiet, the kind where everyone knows everyone's business. First day, I'm at this diner, chatting up the locals. Seemed friendly enough, folks telling me about the town's history, the usual stuff. Got this notebook, scribbling down names, dates, the raw material for my novel. As I'm digging deeper, I hear whispers about this pact, like a secret club or something. They're real hush-hush, dodging my questions with awkward smiles. I start smelling a story, something beyond the usual small-town charm. Late one night, I'm at this bar, and this guy, Tom, he's a few drinks in, spills the beans. Tells me about this pact, a deal with the devil or whatever. They trade stories for success, prosperity, and all that jazz. At first, I'm thinking, yeah, right, crazy talk. But then, Tom gets this haunted look, like he's seen things. Tells me stories he shouldn't know, personal stuff, like he's tapped into the town's collective consciousness. It sends shivers down my spine. Now, I'm intrigued. I want to see this pact in action, so I stick around. People start avoiding me, like they know I'm onto something. My research takes me to this old library with dusty books and creaky floors. In the archives, I find this ancient tome. Written accounts of the town's history, eerily accurate, like they knew the future. That's when it hits me. The stories they tell, they come true. I'm thinking, okay, I've stumbled into some Twilight Zone plot. As I'm trying to connect the dots, strange things start happening. Characters from my novel, they're popping up in the town. I didn't write them here, but they're real, walking, talking, breathing. Freaks me out, man. The townsfolk, they're acting like my characters are long-lost friends. They've embraced them, like they were always meant to be here. I'm caught in this surreal loop, fiction bleeding into reality, and it's getting harder to tell where the novel ends and the town begins. One night, I'm walking the quiet streets, and I see the townspeople gathered in some secret meeting. They're chanting, candles flickering in the dark. I hear my characters' names, my novel's plot, like they're invoking them into existence. It hits me like a freight train. The stories I've written, they're becoming real, living among the locals. The pact, it's more than a twisted fantasy. It's a force that shapes reality based on the tales they tell. I confront them, demand answers. They're smirking, proud of their twisted power. They see me as the unwitting creator, the puppeteer of their fate. The more they reveal, the more I realize how deeply entangled I am in this web of dark storytelling. Now, I'm desperate to break free, to unwrite the horror I've unleashed. But the pact, it's ancient, ingrained in the town's fabric. My characters, they're not characters anymore, they're walking nightmares. I try leaving, but the town won't let me. It's like I'm trapped in my own creation. Every step feels like a plot twist, a chapter leading to a terrifying climax. I'm the outsider turned unwitting puppeteer, and the lines between fiction and reality are fading fast. The townspeople, they've become characters in their own tragic tales. Each whispered word, each recounted detail, it shapes their destiny in ways I never intended. My attempt to escape this nightmare only deepens the horror, as the town rewrites itself with every step I take. I scribble furiously in my notebook, trying to rewrite the narrative, but it's futile. The more I write, the darker the tale becomes. The characters I once crafted as mere words on paper now roam the streets, twisted embodiments of my imagination turned monstrous reality. As the night unfolds, the stories converge into a nightmarish climax. The town, once quaint, becomes a stage for the horrific consequences of my words. The townsfolk, driven by the pact, enact scenes of despair and agony, each tale playing out with visceral intensity. And then it hits me, the ultimate twist. I'm not the author anymore. I'm just another character in this twisted narrative. The pact, the stories, they've consumed me, turning my presence in the town into a tragic subplot. As the first light of dawn breaks, I realize I need to escape, and when I do, my life has already changed forever. Life had taken a turn for the adventurous when my buddies and I decided to embark on a sailing expedition. The allure of the open sea beckoned, promising us uncharted territories and hidden paradises. Little did we know that our thirst for adventure would lead us to a nightmare beyond our wildest imagination. The day we stumbled upon that isolated island remains etched in my memory like a recurring nightmare. The azure waters teased us, luring us toward an untouched tropical paradise. The island emerged on the horizon, draped in lush greenery and framed by pristine beaches. Excitement pulsed through our veins, fueling the adrenaline of discovery. Our first encounter with the islanders was idyllic. A charismatic leader welcomed us with open arms, a smile that hid secrets, and a charm that masked a darker truth. Their community seemed utopian, a tight-knit group living in harmony with nature. We were invited to share in their bounty, and for a moment, the island felt like a haven untouched by the complexities of the outside world. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the islanders gathered around a roaring bonfire, their rhythmic chants echoing through the night. The leader, a magnetic figure with piercing eyes, spoke of unity, enlightenment, and a life untainted by the chaos of civilization. It was a seductive narrative, drawing us into a web of illusions that concealed the peril lurking beneath the surface. The following day, our yacht anchored in the bay, we explored the island's interior. Its beauty was beguiling, but subtle signs of an unsettling reality began to manifest. Whispers among the islanders hinted at a darker purpose. Unanswered questions dangled in the humid air as we uncovered remnants of ships scattered like forgotten dreams in the dense foliage. It was during an innocent conversation with a local that the first shiver of unease gripped my spine. A fleeting remark about the island's past, a history woven with the wreckage of ships that had ventured too close. I dismissed it as folklore, an attempt to mystify their island paradise. As night fell, a subtle shift in the atmosphere hinted at the impending nightmare. The charismatic leader's rhetoric took a sinister turn, his words dripping with fanaticism. The bonfire that once symbolized unity transformed into a flickering portal to a descent into madness. In the darkness, we glimpsed hooded figures emerging from the shadows, their faces masked by an unsettling devotion. Fear gnawed at our guts as we realized the islanders weren't the idyllic community they pretended to be. Their charismatic leader was orchestrating a ritual, a deadly dance fueled by a fanaticism that eclipsed reason. Chaos erupted as we attempted a desperate escape. The island, once a tropical haven, transformed into a labyrinth of terror. Hooded figures pursued us through the dense jungle, their chants now echoing with menace. We stumbled upon a hidden cave, a refuge that became our last stand against the encroaching darkness. As we huddled in the cave's shadows, the islanders' fanaticism reached its peak. A grotesque culmination of their ritual unfolded, merging horror and devotion. The bonfire blazed brighter, casting flickering shadows on the cave walls, each dance of flame a harbinger of our impending doom. The leader's voice rose to a crescendo, his words an unholy incantation that echoed through the cave. It was then that we understood the island's secret, a cult that preyed on passing ships, a deadly trap ensnaring unwitting adventurers in a web of fanaticism and ritualistic horror. In the claustrophobic darkness of the cave, we clung to the hope of survival. The hooded figures, driven by an unholy fervor, closed in on us. The air thickened with terror as the bonfire's glow seeped into our refuge, exposing the shadows that danced like malevolent spirits. The cave became a battleground, our screams blending with the islanders' chants. We fought against the nightmarish tide, every futile struggle an act of defiance against a cult determined to consume us. In the chaos, the line between survival and surrender blurred, our fate hanging in the balance. As the first rays of dawn painted the horizon, we emerged from the cave, survivors of a nightmarish encounter that would forever haunt our dreams. We thought a weekend getaway to Shenandoah National Park in Virginia would be the perfect escape from the mundane routine. Packed into our RV, we headed for the serenity of nature. Little did we know that our tranquil retreat would turn into a nightmare. The park greeted us with its dense forests and winding trails. As we set up camp in a secluded spot, we were blissfully unaware of the tension simmering beneath the surface, a feud between rival groups of campers that had festered for who knows how long. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a serene glow over the park. Around our campfire, we reveled in the simplicity of nature, the stars overhead providing the perfect backdrop. But, unbeknownst to us, the tranquility was a facade concealing a dangerous undercurrent. It started subtly. Hushed whispers from neighboring campsites, furtive glances that spoke volumes, but we dismissed them as products of an overactive imagination. Little did we realize that our chosen spot sat at the nexus of a brewing storm. As night settled in, the atmosphere shifted. The distant flicker of other campfires seemed to take on an ominous glow. It became apparent that two rival groups were in a silent standoff, a feud that escalated with each passing moment. It wasn't long before the stillness of the night was shattered by heated arguments. Harsh words and accusations flew like sparks in the darkness. We huddled inside our RV, the thin walls offering little solace as the tension outside mounted. The situation intensified when the groups descended into physical altercations. Shadows danced in the glow of competing campfires as the rival campers clashed in the dark. We could hear the sounds of scuffling, the echoes of pain, and the chilling realization that we were trapped in the crossfire. Fear gripped us as the chaos outside escalated into a cacophony of violence. Shouts and yells reverberated through the forest, an unsettling symphony of aggression that seemed to close in from all sides. We huddled together, paralyzed by the sheer terror of the unfolding nightmare. Desperation set in as we debated our options. The feuding groups, blinded by their animosity, paid no heed to our presence. We were collateral damage and a few fueled by unknown grievances, and our pleas for peace fell on deaf ears. As we contemplated the unthinkable abandoning our camp in the dead of night, we were met with the realization that the feuding factions had blocked our exit. Our RV sat in the midst of a battleground, the feuding campers unknowingly trapping us in their relentless conflict. The forest, once a refuge, now harbored an atmosphere thick with hostility. We clung to each other, our hearts pounding in sync with the sounds of violence outside. Our RV became a fragile cocoon, offering little protection from the chaos that threatened to consume us. As dawn approached, the feud reached a crescendo. The rival campers, exhausted and battered, retreated to their respective corners of the park. The aftermath of the nightmarish ordeal lay scattered around us, a battlefield of broken tents, smoldering embers, and the lingering stench of fear. As soon as the morning came, we seized the opportunity to escape the park, leaving behind the haunting echoes of the feud that forever marred our supposed weekend escape. I was on a road trip when my car decided to call it quits. It was late, and the only place nearby was this old, rundown motel. The clerk seemed disinterested, but I didn't have many options. I took the room key and settled in for the night. Around midnight, my phone rang. I groggily answered, expecting maybe a tow service or someone checking on my car. But it was this weird static, and then silence. I shrugged it off, thinking it was a wrong number or bad reception. Then it happened again, the same static followed by silence. I felt this unease creeping up on me. I tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. I dismissed it, thinking maybe it was just a prank or a technical glitch. But the calls kept coming, always at odd hours. It was unsettling, this sense of someone watching, someone keeping tabs on me. I tried blocking the number, but the calls continued from different unknown numbers each time. The caller's tone changed. It went from static to heavy breathing, then to whispers. The voice threatened me, said things that made my blood run cold. It felt personal, like they knew me. I reported it to the motel staff, but they couldn't do much. They said they didn't have any records of unusual activity. I felt this growing fear, this sense of being trapped in a place where someone was tormenting me. I barely slept, feeling this constant dread, this fear that the calls might escalate. I wanted to leave, but my car was still in bad shape, and I had no other options. One night, the caller mentioned details about my trip, things only someone following me could know. I felt this surge of panic, this realization that I was being watched, targeted by someone with sinister intentions. I called the police, but without solid evidence, they couldn't do much. I felt this overwhelming vulnerability, this fear that the caller might know where I was. The calls continued, growing more menacing each time. They threatened my safety, said things that felt like a direct threat. I tried to reason, to ask what they wanted, but there was only silence or more threats. I barricaded myself in the room, trying to block out the world outside, but the fear kept gnawing at me. I felt trapped, this feeling of being hunted by an unknown assailant. I couldn't trust anyone, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. It was a nightmare, this constant barrage of calls, this fear that the caller might act on their threats. I begged the motel staff for help, but they seemed indifferent, like they didn't believe me or didn't want to get involved. I felt this isolation, this overwhelming fear that I was alone in this nightmare. One night, the caller mentioned details about my childhood, things no stranger could know. It felt like they were taunting me, this feeling of being invaded, of someone digging into my past. I considered leaving on foot, but it was late, and the roads were deserted. I felt this panic, this fear that if I stepped out, I'd be exposed to whoever was tormenting me. I was paranoid, constantly checking the peephole, feeling this dread that someone might be lurking outside my door. Every sound made me jump, every shadow felt threatening. I didn't know what to do, who to turn to. The calls persisted, this unending torment that felt like it would never stop. I felt this desperation, this urge to escape, to find safety somewhere, anywhere. Eventually, the call stopped, abruptly, without warning. I felt this eerie silence, this lingering fear that it might start again. I didn't know if it was over or just a temporary pause. I packed my things and left the motel, not looking back. So, we, the family, thought it'd be a great idea to have a winter vacation at this fancy ski resort in Aspen, Colorado. You know, hit the slopes, enjoy the crisp mountain air. But, man, that place had more secrets than we bargained for. Everything started all cozy, checking into the swanky resort. We were pumped, ready for some family fun in the snow. But soon, things started getting weird. Accidents left and right, all around the mountain. First, it was just little things, a loose railing, a slippery patch on the slope. We thought, it's a ski resort, accidents happen. But then, it got worse. Ski equipment malfunctioning, sudden icy patches on well-groomed trails. It was like the mountain itself had it out for us. We tried reporting the accidents to the resort staff, but they brushed it off like we were overreacting. Just a run of bad luck, they said. But we felt it in our bones, you know? The cozy winter vacation turned into a paranoia-filled nightmare on the snowy slopes. One day, we found this narrow trail that wasn't on the map. Curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to explore. That's when things got really strange. The trail led to this secluded area, away from the main slopes. It felt like we stumbled upon the resort's dirty little secret. There, we saw the staff arguing, heated exchanges about something we couldn't quite catch. It was like they were hiding more than just ski accidents. As we listened in, it became clear there was some vendetta among the staff, and we accidentally walked right into the crossfire. The tension was thick, like you could cut it with a knife. Accusations flew, fingers pointed. It wasn't just about ski accidents, it was personal. Grudges and revenge brewing among the people we thought were there to ensure our safety. The family went back to our room, shaken by what we witnessed. The cozy resort now felt like a minefield, every step a potential disaster. We started questioning if we should even be there, caught in the middle of a dangerous game among the staff. As we hit the slopes the next day, the accidents escalated. It was like the staff had ramped up their vendetta, making it clear that we were not welcome. Ski lifts malfunctioned, paths were mysteriously blocked. It felt like we were being targeted, and the snowy paradise turned into a battleground. We tried to capture evidence of the incidents, thinking maybe the authorities could sort it out. But each time, our cameras malfunctioned or went missing. The staff was one step ahead, playing dirty in their dangerous game. The family argued about leaving, but we were determined to unveil the truth. As we delved deeper into the mystery, it became clear that the vendetta among the staff had roots in some unresolved conflict. The winter wonderland became a backdrop for a dangerous drama, and we were unwilling participants. One night, we overheard a heated conversation among the staff in the resort's lounge. It was like they were laying out their plan, plotting something big. Fear settled in as we realized we were in the crosshairs of their dangerous game. We reported everything to the resort management, but they dismissed it as paranoia. Accidents happen, they said. But we knew better. The vendetta among the staff escalated, and it felt like we were living in a suspenseful thriller rather than enjoying a winter vacation. The family decided it was time to leave, to escape the dangerous drama unfolding on the snowy slopes. As we packed our bags, we could feel the eyes of the staff on us, like shadows watching from the trees. The cozy resort turned into a place of danger, and our winter vacation became a tale of survival. We left Aspen, leaving behind the cold mountain air and the dangerous vendetta that lurked beneath the snowy surface. So, I'm just a librarian in this quiet Rocky Mountain town, nothing too exciting. The library, a quaint old building with creaky floors, has been my haven for years. One day, while reorganizing the shelves, I stumbled upon a section I'd never noticed before. It was hidden behind a dusty curtain, like the town itself had decided to keep this part a secret. These books were ancient, with cracked leather covers and yellow pages. The titles hinted at forbidden knowledge, the kind you'd expect to find in some dark corner of a forgotten library. It felt wrong, but curiosity got the better of me. I started flipping through them, and that's when things took a turn. The books seemed to predict the town's future, eerie, right? It was as if someone from the past, who lived here over a century ago, had penned down the unfolding darkness. The author, a local from back then, had this uncanny ability to foresee events that matched the town's trajectory. The more I read, the more it felt like a curse. The predictions weren't pleasant either. Dark secrets, scandals, and tragedies that mirrored our reality. It was like the town had been stuck in a loop of despair, and I was privy to a script written ages ago. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the books held a malevolent power. The library, once my sanctuary, felt like it had us watching my every move. Paranoia set in. I started seeing shadows, hearing whispers that echoed through the silent aisles. Then came the strange occurrences around town, events that played out exactly as described in those forbidden books. It was like the author from the past had left a cursed legacy that the town couldn't escape. The future, laid out in those pages, was unfolding before my eyes. I tried talking to the locals about it, but they dismissed it as nonsense. The town, proud of its history, refused to acknowledge the possibility that someone from its past could have foreseen its darkest moments. The more I pushed, the more I became an outsider, an intruder into the town's carefully constructed denial. The books, like forbidden relics, seemed to call out to me. Each time I entered that hidden section, the air grew heavier, and the temperature dropped. It was as if the spirits of the past were lingering, urging me to uncover the truth and break the curse that bound the town. I became obsessed, digging into historical records, trying to trace the steps of the author from over a century ago. The town's archives revealed the existence of a mysterious figure, a recluse who had lived on the outskirts and had been shunned by the community. It was him, the one who had penned down the town's grim fate. One night, as I delved deeper into the forbidden section, I found a letter hidden among the books. It was a confession of guilt and remorse, written by the long-dead author. He spoke of a pact with some unseen force, a bargain that allowed him to see the future in exchange for eternal suffering. The letter hinted at a way to break the curse, to sever the connection between the town's dark fate and those forbidden books. The author, burdened by guilt, had left behind a guide to free the town from the shackles of his predictions. I gathered a few brave souls from the town, those who were willing to confront the darkness that had crept our home. Together, we followed the instructions laid out in the letter, a ritual to break the curse and release the town from the clutches of its twisted destiny. As we performed the ritual, the air crackled with energy. Shadows danced around us, and the temperature plummeted. It felt like we were battling unseen forces, wrestling with the lingering spirits of the past. The town's fate hung in the balance, and our actions would determine whether we could rewrite its dark future. The climax of the ritual brought a surge of power, a moment where the town's history and the present collided. It was as if time itself had been rewound, and for a brief moment, we glimpsed an alternate reality where the town was free from the grip of those cursed books. The ritual ended, leaving us breathless and uncertain. The forbidden section in the library seemed different now, the air lighter, the shadows less menacing. The curse, it seemed, had been broken, and the town was no longer bound by the predictions of its troubled past. As we stepped out into the cool Rocky Mountain night, there was a strange calm. The town, once haunted by the echoes of its dark history, felt reborn. The books, now just dusty tomes on a forgotten shelf, no longer held the power to dictate the future. Life in the Rocky Mountain town resumed, but the memory of those forbidden books lingered. The library, now free from its hidden curse, became a place of solace once again. The people, still unaware of the dark chapter we had just closed, went about their lives with a newfound sense of hope. Moving into the new house was supposed to mark a fresh start for me. After leaving behind my life as a private investigator, I was eager to settle into a quiet neighborhood and leave the chaos of my past behind. The house seemed perfect, cozy, with a spacious backyard and friendly neighbors. But as I started to unpack my boxes and settle into my new home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It started with my neighbor, Mr. Johnson. He seemed like a friendly enough guy at first, always offering a wave and a smile whenever we crossed paths. But the more I observed him, the more I started to notice strange behavior. He would come and go at odd hours of the night, his movements furtive and secretive. And whenever I tried to strike up a conversation, he would quickly change the subject or make some excuse to end the interaction. I tried to brush it off as just the quirks of a new neighbor, but the feeling of unease lingered. There was something about Mr. Johnson that didn't sit right with me, something that made my skin crawl whenever he was around. Then, one night, I heard strange noises coming from his house. It was late, well past midnight, and I couldn't imagine why anyone would be up and about at that hour. I debated whether to investigate, but something held me back. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something sinister happening on the other side of the wall, something that I wasn't meant to see. As the days passed, the strange occurrences only grew more frequent. I would catch glimpses of Mr. Johnson through his windows, his face twisted in a mask of fear and paranoia. And whenever I tried to confront him about it, he would just brush me off and tell me not to worry. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, that Mr. Johnson was hiding something dark and sinister behind closed doors. I tried to focus on settling into my new life, but the feeling of unease lingered, gnawing at the back of my mind like a persistent itch. Then, one day, I received a package in the mail addressed to Mr. Johnson. It was a small, nondescript box, but something about it sent a chill down my spine. I debated whether to open it and see what was inside, but something told me that it was better left untouched. Instead, I decided to do some digging into Mr. Johnson's background, hoping to uncover some clue as to what was going on. But the more I searched, the less I found. It was like he was a ghost, with no online presence or paper trail to speak of. I tried to reach out to other neighbors to see if they had noticed anything strange about Mr. Johnson, but they all just shrugged it off and told me not to worry. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was onto something, that there was more to Mr. Johnson than met the eye. Then, one night, as I was lying in bed, I heard a knock on the door. It was late, well past midnight, and I couldn't imagine who would be calling at that hour. I debated whether to answer it, but something told me that it was better left unanswered. As I lay there in the darkness, the knocking grew louder and more insistent, echoing through the empty house like a drumbeat of doom. I felt a surge of fear rising within me, but I forced myself to stay calm, to wait and see what would happen next. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the knocking stopped. I lay there in the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest, waiting for the sound to return. But it never did. I knew then that I had to leave, to get as far away from Mr. Johnson and his dark secrets as possible. So, I packed up my things and left the house behind, never looking back. But even now, years later, the memory of Mr. Johnson and his strange behavior still haunts me. I may never know what he was up to, but one thing's for certain, I'll never forget the terror I felt living next door to him. I love nothing more than exploring the great outdoors on my own. So when I decided to embark on a solo trek through the mountains in search of solitude, I was filled with excitement and anticipation. I packed my gear and set out for the wilderness, eager for the adventure that lay ahead. The first few days of my trek were peaceful and serene. I hiked through towering forests and along rugged mountain trails, reveling in the beauty of nature all around me. But then, on the third day of my journey, I stumbled upon something that would change everything. As I was hiking along a narrow trail, I noticed a small opening in the side of a cliff. Curiosity piqued, I decided to investigate further. I scrambled up the rocky slope and peered into the darkness of the cave. What I found inside took my breath away. The cave was filled with strange symbols etched into the walls, their meaning and origin unknown to me. They seemed ancient, as if they had been there for centuries, untouched by time. Fear prickled at the back of my neck as I realized that I had stumbled upon something far more sinister than I had ever imagined. The air in the cave felt heavy and oppressive, as if weighed down by an unseen presence. I wanted to turn and run, to get as far away from the cave as possible, but something held me back. A voice in the back of my mind urged me to stay, to uncover the secrets that lay hidden within the darkness. With trembling hands, I reached out and traced the outline of one of the symbols on the wall. As I did, a chill ran down my spine, and I felt a sense of unease wash over me. Suddenly, I heard a noise echoing from the depths of the cave. It was faint at first, barely audible above the sound of my own heartbeat, but it grew louder and more insistent with each passing moment. Panic surged through me as I realized that I was now alone in the cave. Someone or something was watching me from the shadows, its presence lurking just out of sight. With a sense of urgency, I turned and fled from the cave, the sound of my footsteps echoing off the walls. I ran faster than I had ever run before, the fear driving me onwards, away from whatever lurked in the darkness. But as I emerged from the cave and into the sunlight, I knew that my ordeal was far from over. The symbols had awakened something ancient and malevolent, something that would stop at nothing to protect its secrets. As I continued on my journey through the mountains, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed, that the eyes of the unknown were watching me from the shadows. I pushed myself to keep going, to put as much distance between myself and the cave as possible. But no matter how far I ran, I couldn't escape the feeling of dread that hung over me like a dark cloud. In the end, I made it back to civilization unharmed, but the memory of my encounter with the cave haunted me long after I had returned home. So, a few buddies and I decided to venture into the Louisiana Bayou for a fishing trip. We were looking for that authentic experience, you know? Swampy waters, moss-draped trees, and the whole deal. We heard about this local guide, Old Man Thibodeau, who apparently knew those murky waters like the back of his hand. We met Thibodeau at the docks, a weathered man with a face etched with the tales of the bayou. He had this wild look in his eyes, like he'd seen things most folks would run away from. But hey, we thought it added to the authenticity, gave the trip a bit of a spooky edge. The day started normal enough. Thibodeau maneuvered the boat through the swamp, pointing out gators and exotic birds like a living encyclopedia. We caught a couple of fish, enjoyed the warm Louisiana sun, and everything seemed perfect. As evening crept in, that's when things got weird. Thibodeau, in his raspy voice, started telling us stories. Stories about the bayou, tales of mysterious disappearances, and legends of creatures lurking beneath the murky surface. At first, we brushed it off as local folklore, you know, part of the show. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, Thibodeau's demeanor changed. He became jittery, eyes darting around like he expected something to jump out of the shadows. We should have felt uneasy, but the bayou at night, it's a whole different world. Thibodeau steered the boat into narrower, darker channels. The moonlight barely penetrated the dense canopy, casting eerie reflections on the water. That's when we started hearing it, whispers in the night, faint murmurs that seemed to echo through the swamp. Our laughter from earlier died down as Thibodeau led us deeper into the labyrinth of the bayou. The air grew thick with tension, and we exchanged uneasy glances. I asked Thibodeau about those disappearances he mentioned earlier, hoping it was just a dramatic narrative to spook the city folks. His response, though, sent shivers down our spines. He claimed the bayou demanded sacrifices, appeasements to some ancient force that ruled those waters. Sacrifices offered willingly or taken forcefully, he said with a sinister grin. That's when we realized this wasn't just a fishing trip. Thibodeau had a dark agenda, and we were at the mercy of the swamp's secrets. The boat slowed to a crawl, and Thibodeau's eyes gleamed with an unsettling hunger. Suddenly, he produced a rusty blade from his weathered jacket, and our hearts pounded in our chests. The whispers in the night grew louder, as if the bayou itself conspired against us. Panic set in, and we knew we had to escape this nightmare. In a moment of sheer adrenaline, we tackled Thibodeau, wrestled the blade away, and booked it. Through the tangled roots, under the looming branches, we ran like our lives depended on it because, in that twisted moment, they probably did. We stumbled back into the relative safety of the main channels, gasping for breath. The bayou, with its dark secrets, loomed behind us. Thibodeau, left stranded in the swamp, watched with that wild look in his eyes as we disappeared into the night. We reported the incident to the local police, but the bayou keeps its secrets. The disappearances, the sacrifices, it's all part of a dark dance that unfolds when the sun sets over the Louisiana swamp. I signed up for this beach cleanup thing in Santa Monica. You know, trying to do my part for the environment. Figured it'd be a chill day picking up trash, helping out. Man, was I wrong. It started like any other cleanup, the sun beating down, waves crashing. I had my gloves on, ready to tackle the mess. Picked up the usual stuff at first, plastic bottles, cigarette butts, the usual suspects. Nothing out of the ordinary. Then, things got weird. I stumbled upon this box, washed up like it got tossed around in the ocean for ages. It was sealed tight, no markings, just this ominous-looking thing. I should have left it alone, but curiosity got the better of me. I cracked it open, and inside, there were these weird symbols, papers, and photos. Looked like some secret society stuff, and that's when things took a nosedive. I noticed someone watching me, from a distance. A guy in a suit, blending into the crowd but sticking out like a sore thumb. I tried to act cool, kept cleaning, but he was always there, lurking. I went back to the box, thinking maybe I could get more info. Stupid move. Suddenly, I had company, a couple of burly dudes, looking like they stepped out of a detective movie. They weren't here for the beach view, that's for sure. I pretended not to notice them, but the tension was thick. I'm just here to clean up the beach, right? What's with these shady characters? They started talking in hushed tones, eyes locked on me. I thought, okay, this isn't just a cleanup anymore. I tried to slip away, act like I didn't know anything, but they followed. It was like I'd stumbled into some secret operation. I considered calling the cops, but then I thought, what if they're in on it too? As I walked away, I noticed the guy in the suit was on his phone, probably calling in reinforcements. My heart raced. This was Santa Monica, not some spy movie backdrop. I wasn't equipped for this. I made my way to a more crowded area, thinking I could blend in, but they kept tailing me. Every turn, every glance over my shoulder, they were there. My paranoia was off the charts. Who were these people, and what did they want with me? I ditched my gloves, the ones with my fingerprints all over them, hoping it'd throw them off. But they were relentless. I finally made a break for it, sprinted through the crowds, heart pounding in my chest. Found a cafe, ducked inside, and tried to catch my breath. But they were still out there, pacing around like hungry sharks. I couldn't shake the feeling that I stumbled onto something big, something dangerous. I hightailed it out of there, ditched the box, and kept my head low. I don't know what was in those papers, but it wasn't worth risking my neck. We decided on a family camping trip in Yosemite, hoping for nature's embrace. Our RV trundled through the winding roads, and the majestic beauty of the park greeted us. Little did we know, our retreat into the wilderness would become a nightmare. Our spot was nestled near a tranquil creek, the perfect backdrop for what we hoped would be a peaceful weekend. The sun dipped behind the towering pines as we set up camp, blissfully unaware of the impending darkness. As night fell, a distant crackle of flames echoed through the trees. Curiosity got the better of me, and I ventured into the shadows to investigate. There, on the edge of our campsite, I stumbled upon a scene I wasn't prepared for: two groups engaged in a fierce confrontation. On one side, a family much like ours, children, parents, faces etched with fear. On the other, a group of strangers with a menacing aura, their words laced with hostility. The air hung heavy with tension. In hushed tones, I learned of a territorial dispute. Both parties claimed this slice of Yosemite as their own, and we were caught in the crossfire. My heart sank. The picturesque surroundings now masked a danger that threatened to shatter our idyllic getaway. The standoff intensified. Words turned to threats, and the night air vibrated with hostility. Panic set in as our once serene camping spot became a battleground. Shadows danced around our RV, ominous and threatening. Desperation guided my actions. I ushered my family into the RV, a flimsy metal shell that suddenly felt like our only sanctuary. Through the thin walls, we could hear the heated exchanges, the threat of violence lingering in the air. Hours passed like a slow nightmare. The distant sounds of the confrontation melded with the chorus of night creatures, creating an eerie symphony. Tensions peaked, and I clutched a flashlight, ready to defend my family against an unseen threat. Then, as abruptly as it began, the confrontation subsided. Whispers of compromise echoed through the trees. Exhausted and terrified, we cautiously emerged from our refuge, finding a fragile peace had settled over the Yosemite night. The RV, our once safe haven, now felt tainted by the echoes of conflict. We left Yosemite with a haunting tale, a story of a family caught between rival forces in the heart of the wilderness. The majestic scenery had masked the darkness that lurked beneath, leaving us with an unsettling realization: even in the most serene places, danger could emerge, turning a dream vacation into a chilling reality. I was on my way to visit family, a long drive ahead of me. The road seemed endless, and I needed a break from the monotony. That's when I saw what seemed like a shortcut, a smaller road cutting through the landscape. It felt like a good idea at the time. As I took the turn, the road gradually narrowed, becoming less traveled. The daylight started to wane, and a sense of isolation surrounded me. The gas gauge in my car dipped dangerously low. Anxiety began to creep in as I realized my impulsive shortcut might not have been the best decision. In the distance, a small diner emerged, its lights flickering against the dimming sky. It was my only hope for directions or a chance to refuel. As I approached, the neon open sign switched off, but I still pulled into the lot, hoping someone might still be around. A couple was locking up, their figures silhouetted against the diner's interior lights. I rushed to catch them, desperate for directions or any help they could offer. But as I approached, their demeanor struck me as odd. Their eyes bore into me, unwelcoming and almost hostile. I tried to ask for directions, but they simply stared, their expressions blank. The man, a burly figure with a stony face, finally spoke in a low, gruff voice. His words were curt, barely acknowledging my presence. I felt a chill run down my spine, an unsettling sensation at their peculiar behavior. The woman, equally eerie, remained silent, her gaze fixed on me, almost unblinking. It felt like they were sizing me up, studying me with a disturbing intensity. I asked again, desperation creeping into my voice, but their response was cryptic, almost dismissive. The air was thick with unease, and my instincts urged me to leave. But as I turned to head back to my car, they blocked my path. Their faces twisted into eerie smiles, revealing a set of unnaturally gleaming teeth. Fear gripped me, and I felt trapped, cornered by these strangers in the fading light. Their demeanor shifted, their voices turning icy as they spoke in unison. Their words were cryptic, foreboding a warning or a threat I couldn't discern. Panic surged through me, my pulse pounding in my ears. I stumbled back, trying to find an escape route. But their movements were too calculated, too precise. I felt a chilling realization that I was at their mercy, surrounded by their eerie presence in this desolate place. Their faces twisted into malicious grins, and I knew I had to get away, to break free from this eerie encounter. With a burst of adrenaline, I darted towards my car, fumbling for my keys, the sound of my heart drowning out everything else. I leaped inside and slammed the door shut, peeling out of the lot, leaving behind a cloud of dust. As I sped away, the couple's eerie stares haunted my thoughts, their cryptic words echoing in my mind. Fear and relief warred within me as I drove, my hands trembling on the wheel. It took miles before I dared to breathe again, before I felt a semblance of safety. I didn't stop until I reached a well-lit town, surrounded by other people. The encounter had left me shaken. So, there I am, decided to check out this winter carnival in Quebec City, Canada. The place was buzzing with festivity, the colorful lights and cheerful music making it seem like the perfect escape from the winter chill. But little did I know, things were about to take a dark turn. I wandered through the carnival, the lively atmosphere contagious. The air was filled with laughter and the scent of hot cocoa, and I thought it was just going to be a fun night. But as I strolled deeper into the festivities, I noticed something off. There was this hidden corner, away from the main attractions, where the mood changed. The festive cheer gave way to hushed conversations and mysterious glances. It was like stumbling upon a hidden world beneath the colorful exterior. Curiosity got the better of me, and I ventured into the obscure part of the carnival. That's when I noticed a group of people, clad in dark clothes, engaged in some kind of ritual. It felt like I had stumbled upon a secret society, hidden beneath the facade of the winter celebration. As I observed, the atmosphere turned ominous. The people in the group seemed to sense my presence, their eyes locking onto mine. Fear crept in, and I tried to blend in, pretending to be just another carnival goer. But the hidden world beneath the festivities felt like a maze, and I was caught in its tangled web. I followed the group discreetly, my heart pounding with each step. They led me to an old, abandoned building on the outskirts of the carnival. The festive music faded, replaced by an eerie silence. I hesitated, but curiosity pushed me forward, deeper into the unknown. Inside, the hidden world revealed itself. The group was involved in some kind of ritualistic ceremony, candles flickering in the dimly lit space. Symbols adorned the walls, and the air was heavy with a sense of foreboding. I realized I had stumbled upon something beyond the festive facade, a dark underbelly hidden in plain sight. Suddenly, one of them noticed me. Panic set in, and I turned to flee, but the entrance had vanished. The festive music that once echoed through the carnival now felt like a distant memory. The hidden world beneath had me trapped, entangled in a series of ominous events. The group surrounded me, their expressions unreadable. Fear gripped me as they began chanting, the ritual taking a dark turn. I tried to reason with them, plead for my freedom, but their eyes held a darkness that sent shivers down my spine. As the ritual intensified, the building seemed to pulsate with an otherworldly energy. Shadows danced on the walls, and the symbols seemed to come alive. It was like being trapped in a nightmare, the festive carnival replaced by a chilling spectacle of the unknown. I closed my eyes, hoping it was just a bad dream, but when I opened them again, the hidden world had me in its clutches. The ritual reached its climax, and the air crackled with an unsettling energy. I felt a force pulling at me, as if the carnival itself had turned into a malevolent entity. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. The chanting ceased, and the symbols on the walls faded away. The group dispersed, leaving me alone in the abandoned building. The festive music returned, but it sounded different, tainted by the ominous events I had witnessed. I stumbled out of the hidden world, the carnival now a surreal and twisted place. The winter chill felt more biting, and the cheerful atmosphere seemed like a facade. I reported the eerie encounter to the authorities, but the hidden world beneath the winter carnival haunted me. The festive celebration that drew me in had transformed into a nightmarish ordeal, a reminder that even in the midst of joyous occasions, there could be a hidden world lurking in the shadows. The winter carnival, once a symbol of merriment, became a chilling memory of an encounter with the unknown. It was late, and the fuel gauge needle was flirting dangerously close to empty. My headlights illuminated a sign on the desolate highway, gas, 10 miles. Grateful for the reprieve, I turned off the highway and followed a narrow, winding road that seemed to disappear into the darkness. After what felt like an eternity, a flickering neon sign emerged on the horizon, last stop gas station. The place looked like it had seen better days, with a worn-out building and a solitary gas pump standing in front. I pulled in, the gravel crunching beneath my tires. The night air was thick with an unsettling silence. The only sound was the soft humming of the flickering fluorescent lights above the gas pump. I stepped out of the car, the creaking of the door echoing in the emptiness. The attendant emerged from the shadows, his features obscured by the dim glow of the fluorescent lights. He was an older man, hunched and weathered, with eyes that seemed to hold a lifetime of secrets. His gaze locked onto mine, and a shiver ran down my spine. His movements were slow, deliberate, as he reached for the pump without breaking eye contact. I handed him a few crumpled bills, my fingers brushing against his cold, gnarled hands. As he pumped the gas, an uncomfortable silence settled over us. The air felt thick with tension, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I glanced around, noticing the absence of any other customers or signs of life. The night seemed to press in from all sides, an oppressive darkness that swallowed the gas station whole. I thanked the attendant as he handed me the receipt, but his response was an unnerving silence. His eyes bore into mine, an intensity that made me uneasy. I mumbled a goodbye and headed back to my car, the gravel crunching beneath my shoes. As I turned the key in the ignition, the headlights revealed something that sent a chill down my spine. The attendant was standing just outside the pool of light, staring at me with an unblinking gaze. His lips curled into a sinister smile, and a feeling of dread washed over me. I pulled away from the gas station, the tires spinning on the gravel. Glancing in the rearview mirror, I saw the dim glow of the neon sign fading into the distance. But the unease lingered, settling deep within me like a dormant fear waiting to surface. The road ahead stretched into the unknown, and my mind raced with questions. What was it about that gas station, that peculiar attendant, that left me feeling so unsettled? The rhythmic thud of my heartbeat echoed in the silence of the car as I drove through the desolate night, haunted by the encounter at the last stop gas station. Hours passed, and the empty highway seemed to stretch endlessly before me. The gas station became a distant memory, but the sense of unease clung to me like a shadow. My thoughts were interrupted by a flicker in the rearview mirror, the distant glow of headlights closing in fast. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, trying to shake off the feeling of being pursued. The headlights drew closer, revealing a familiar silhouette, the same gas station attendant, his expression twisted into a malevolent grin. Panic set in as he tailgated my car, the dark road offering no refuge. I sped up, desperately trying to outrun the ominous figure behind me. The headlights of his vehicle loomed large in my rearview mirror, casting an eerie glow. The deserted highway offered no escape, and the sense of dread intensified with each passing mile. My mind raced, searching for a solution. Should I pull over, confront the menacing figure, or continue the desperate attempt to escape? Fear clung to me like a suffocating fog as I navigated the desolate road, the gas station attendant a relentless pursuer in the darkness. Suddenly, my car sputtered, the engine coughing to a stop. Panic surged as I coasted to the side of the road, the headlights of the pursuer casting an ominous shadow over my stalled vehicle. The gas station attendant pulled up behind me, his car idling with a low growl. I fumbled with the keys, trying to restart the engine, but it remained stubbornly silent. The air in the car became stifling as I realized the gravity of the situation. Trapped on the deserted highway, pursued by the mysterious and threatening gas station attendant, I felt a cold dread settle over me. He stepped out of his car, the gravel crunching beneath his boots. His malevolent grin widened as he approached my stalled vehicle. The night seemed to close in, the darkness swallowing me whole as I sat there, helpless and at the mercy of this peculiar and increasingly threatening stranger. He reached my window, his face leering in the dim glow. I locked eyes with him, the depths of his gaze filled with malice. I pleaded for mercy, but his expression remained cold and calculating. As he raised his hand to the window, a surge of terror paralyzed me. The encounter at the last stop gas station had escalated into a nightmarish ordeal. The once desolate highway now felt like a sinister trap, with the ominous figure outside my window representing a threat beyond comprehension. The seconds stretched into an agonizing eternity as the gas station attendant's hand hovered, a symbol of impending doom. And then, with a sudden jolt, my car roared back to life. I slammed my foot on the gas pedal, the tires screeching against the asphalt as I sped away from the gas station attendant and the nightmarish encounter on that desolate highway. The headlights of his car faded into the distance, but the haunting memory of that peculiar and threatening figure stayed in my brain. Being a ranger in Great Basin National Park meant days filled with routine checks and encounters with nature lovers. However, one sunny day, routine took a chilling turn. My walkie-talkie buzzed with reports of suspicious activity involving bird watchers near the ancient bristlecone pines. Heading towards the reported location, I saw a group huddled in intense discussion. They weren't your typical bird watchers. Binoculars and notepads were accompanied by a strange determination. Approaching cautiously, I inquired about their activities, trying to discern the reason behind their unsettling obsession. Their leader, an intense man with disheveled hair, explained their mission. They believed a rare bird species nested deep within the park, a species unknown to science. As a ranger, I was accustomed to enthusiasts, but this group's fervor felt unnatural, a disturbance in the park's delicate balance. The leader claimed the bird held the key to ecological revelations and that their quest was a noble pursuit. However, their methods betrayed an unsettling obsession. They trespassed into restricted zones, disrupting habitats and disregarding the park's preservation principles. I attempted to reason with them, emphasizing the importance of preserving the ecosystem. But their obsession surpassed reason. They spoke in riddles, convinced their actions were a sacred mission to unlock nature's secrets. Days turned into a tense game of cat and mouse. The bird watchers, fueled by an unrelenting passion, dodged park regulations, driven to extremes to unveil the mysteries they believed the rare bird held. They camped in forbidden areas, upsetting the natural order of the park. As their obsession intensified, so did my concern. Their presence jeopardized the well-being of the park's inhabitants, disturbing the fragile ecosystem. I found myself caught between a duty to protect the park and a group whose obsession bordered on madness. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I received a report of a disturbance in the restricted research zone. Racing against time, I arrived to find the bird watchers setting up camp. It wasn't just a camp, it was a makeshift base, complete with surveillance equipment and makeshift blinds. The leader approached, eyes gleaming with an unsettling determination. He spoke cryptically about the imminent revelation the bird would bring. I tried reasoning once more, but my words fell on deaf ears. Their obsession had reached a point where they saw me as an obstacle to their sacred quest. As night descended, a surreal atmosphere settled over the park. The bird watchers, driven by their obsession, were blind to the consequences of their actions. They moved through the shadows, infringing on the park's sanctuary in pursuit of their elusive prize. A confrontation loomed. The eerie silence of the night was shattered by whispers and furtive movements. The leader, now consumed by his quest, issued veiled threats against anyone who stood in their way. I radioed for backup, realizing this encounter could escalate into something beyond my control. The backup arrived, and a tense standoff ensued. The bird watchers, now outnumbered, reluctantly retreated. As they disappeared into the darkness, their obsession remained embedded in the park's fabric, a dark undercurrent threatening the delicate balance of Great Basin National Park. In the aftermath, I grappled with the realization that sometimes the threats to a national park didn't come in the form of poachers or vandals. The obsession of these bird watchers, their distorted mission, left an indelible mark on the serene landscape, a stark reminder that even those who claim to love nature can, in their obsession, become unwitting destroyers of the very thing they seek to understand. Me and the gang, we decide to go camping in the Florida Everglades. You know, thinking it's gonna be all fun and games, nature, and chilling by the fire. We set up our tents, crack some beers, and start enjoying the swampy atmosphere. Everything's cool, or so we think. Night rolls in, and we're gathered around the fire, laughing, sharing stories. That's when we hear it, this rustling in the bushes. We brush it off, like it's the Everglades, right? Probably just some critters doing their thing. But as the night creeps on, the rustling doesn't stop. It's like there's someone or something lurking in the shadows. We can't shake this feeling that we're being watched. A couple of us suggest it's just our imagination, but deep down, we know it's not. We decide to turn in for the night, get into our tents, zip them up tight. That's when things take a turn. We hear footsteps, heavy ones, not like an animal, more like a person. Panic sets in, but we're trying to play it cool, you know, pretending we're not scared out of our minds. Then, this figure appears outside our campsite, wearing a swamp ranger uniform. We're relieved, thinking maybe he's here to check on us, make sure we're not breaking any camping rules. But the vibe he's giving off, it's off, like a shiver down your spine kinda off. He starts asking questions, normal stuff at first, like if we've seen any gators or snakes. We're nodding, trying to be friendly, but his eyes, man, they're intense, like he's sizing us up. And that's when the questions take a dark turn. He starts asking about our plans, where we're heading, what routes we're taking. It's like he's trying to piece together something we don't even know. We're getting uneasy, realizing this ranger isn't here to help, he's here for something else. He leans in, whispers something about dangerous folks in the swamp, warns us to stay close, stay together. But the way he says it, it's not a warning, it's a threat. Like, if we don't listen, something bad's gonna happen. We're freaked out, contemplating packing up and getting the hell out of there. But then he says something that freezes our blood. He mentions a series of disappearances, folks who camped in these parts and were never seen again. And he's looking at us like we're the next chapter in that messed up story. We decide to play along, act like we're buying into his warnings. Inside the tents, we're whispering, making a plan to ditch this place the moment he's out of sight. But that's when it gets worse. We notice more figures emerging from the shadows, other rangers, or what look like rangers. They're not here to protect, they're part of something sinister. We're surrounded, and the swamp ranger, he's grinning like he's got us right where he wants us. As he walks away, disappearing into the darkness, we seize the moment, grab our stuff, and bolt. It's pitch black, and we're stumbling through the swamp, branches grabbing at us, mud sucking us in. Panic's setting in, and we can still hear those footsteps behind us, like the swamp's closing in on us. Eventually, we break through the tree line, gasping for air. We don't stop until we're miles away from the cursed campsite. As the sun rises, we look at each other, realizing how close we came to being part of those swamp disappearances. We report the whole messed up encounter to the authorities, but there's this nagging fear that maybe those swamp rangers, or whatever they were, are still out there. So, I'm this solo traveler, right? Decided to rent this historic Airbnb in the French Quarter of New Orleans. Thought it would be a cool way to experience the city's vibe. Little did I know, this place was going to be more than I bargained for. The Airbnb looked charming, this old building with a lot of character. I was excited, thinking it would be a cozy stay in the heart of the French Quarter. But, you know, looks can be deceiving. As I settled in, things started feeling off. The air in the place was heavy, like there was something lingering in the corners. But I brushed it off, thinking it was just an old building with its quirks. One night, as I was exploring the place, I found this hidden door behind a bookshelf. It led to this narrow staircase that descended into darkness. Curiosity got the better of me, and I went down those creaky steps. Turns out, the Airbnb had this hidden underground space. It was like a whole other world down there. The air was musty, and the dim light barely illuminated the space. It felt like stepping into a different era, and that's when things got weird. As I snooped around, I found old documents, faded photographs, and letters hinting at some shady dealings. The charming property had a dark history, and I was stumbling into a web of deception. It was like the building itself was hiding its secrets in the shadows. The more I dug into the hidden history, the more I felt this sense of danger closing in. It was like the walls themselves were watching, and the air grew thicker with every revelation. The cozy Airbnb turned into a labyrinth of lies and danger. One night, as I was heading back up from the underground space, I heard voices. Whispers that echoed in the narrow staircase. Panic set in as I realized I wasn't alone in this historic Airbnb. Someone else was there, and their intentions were unclear. I tried to stay quiet, to not draw attention to myself. The shadows seemed to dance, and the air became charged with an ominous energy. It was like the charming property was holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. Then, I saw them. A group of people, cloaked in darkness, moving with purpose. It wasn't just a historic Airbnb, it was a hideout for some shady dealings. My heart raced as I realized I had stumbled upon something way more dangerous than a solo traveler should ever encounter. As the group descended into the hidden space, I tried to slip away unnoticed. But the creaky steps betrayed me, and they turned to face me. Fear gripped me as I stood there, caught in the act. The cozy charm of the Airbnb transformed into a stage for a dangerous encounter. They questioned me, their eyes filled with suspicion. I played innocent, claiming I was just exploring the historic aspects of the place. But deep down, I knew I had stumbled into something that went beyond the charm of a French Quarter Airbnb. The group's demeanor shifted, and I realized I was in over my head. They weren't just history enthusiasts, they were involved in something illicit. The cozy facade of the Airbnb became a backdrop for a confrontation with dangerous individuals. They didn't want me snooping around, and the danger in their eyes was palpable. Panic set in as I realized I had to get out of there, away from the historic property that now felt like a trap closing in. I stumbled up the staircase, the voices and shadows fading as I reached the familiar ground. I packed my things in a hurry, leaving the Airbnb behind. The charming property had turned into a nightmare, and the French Quarter, once a symbol of vibrant culture, felt like a labyrinth of deception and danger. I reported the incident to the authorities, but the mystery of the historic Airbnb remained unsolved. I was on a trip for work, booked a room at this hotel. Seemed alright at first. But the room I got, it felt off somehow, this weird vibe that made me uneasy. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something about it just didn't sit right. The air was heavy, and there was this strange smell, musty and stale. It made me feel on edge, this discomfort that I couldn't shake off. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe I was being too sensitive, but as the night crept in, the unease grew. It was like this feeling of being watched, this sense that something wasn't right about that room. I barely slept, tossing and turning, feeling this growing fear that kept me wide awake. There were these faint noises, creaks and whispers that I couldn't explain. It felt like the room had a life of its own, and it wasn't a friendly one. The next morning, I asked the hotel staff for a room change, citing some made-up reason about the air conditioning not working right. They obliged and gave me a new room on a different floor. But as soon as I stepped into the new room, it was worse. The air was stifling, this heavy feeling pressing down on me. It felt colder, but not in a comforting way, more like a chilling, bone-deep coldness. I tried to shake it off, to tell myself it was just my imagination, but the room had this eerie stillness, this suffocating silence that sent shivers down my spine. I noticed things were off. The paintings on the walls, they were crooked, like someone had hurriedly put them up. The curtains fluttered, even though there was no draft, no open window. I felt this overwhelming sense of discomfort, this fear that something wasn't right about that room. It felt like it was hiding something, something dark and unsettling. The lights flickered, and I heard this faint scratching noise, like nails against the walls. I searched the room, but there was no source, no explanation for the sound. I tried to leave, to ask for yet another room change, but when I opened the door, it wouldn't budge. It was like it was stuck, locked from the outside. Panic set in, this feeling of being trapped in that unsettling room. I tried calling the front desk, but the phone didn't work. I felt this growing terror, this fear that I was alone in that eerie place. The temperature dropped, and I saw my breath misting in front of me. I shivered, this chill that went right down to my bones. It felt like the room was getting colder, this freezing cold that seeped into my skin. I heard whispers, faint at first, then growing louder, this unintelligible murmur that filled the room. I felt this overwhelming sense of dread, this fear that I wasn't alone, that something else was there with me. I saw shadows moving, flickering in the corners of the room. I tried to rationalize, to tell myself it was just my imagination, but it felt too real, too terrifying to be dismissed. I felt this urge to get out, this primal need to escape that unsettling room. I pushed at the door with all my strength, finally managing to force it open. I ran out, not looking back, not caring where I was going as long as it was away from that room. I went straight to the hotel staff, trying to explain what had happened, but they looked at me like I was crazy. They assured me that there was no issue with the rooms, that everything was fine. But I knew what I had experienced. It was real. This nightmare I couldn't explain. I was just a regular guy working at a hardware store, helping customers find the tools and materials they needed for their projects. It was a job like any other, until one day, things took a terrifying turn. It started with a simple complaint from a customer who claimed that a product they had purchased was faulty. I tried to help them as best I could, offering a refund or replacement, but they weren't satisfied. They demanded compensation for their inconvenience, growing more agitated with each passing moment. I did my best to defuse the situation, but the customer's anger only seemed to escalate. They started making threats, telling me that they would make me pay for the trouble they had endured because of the faulty product. At first, I brushed off their threats as empty words, but then the phone calls started. They would call the store multiple times a day, leaving angry messages and hurling insults at me over the phone. I tried to ignore them, to focus on my work and not let their words get to me, but it was hard not to feel afraid. As the days went by, the threats grew more and more sinister. The customer claimed that they knew where I lived, that they would come after me and make me pay for what they perceived as my negligence. I tried to brush it off as idle threats, but deep down, I knew that they were serious. I started to feel like I was being watched, like someone was always lurking just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I couldn't sleep at night, my mind consumed with fear and paranoia over what the customer might do next. Then, one day, I received a package in the mail. It was addressed to me, with no return address or sender's name. I hesitated for a moment before opening it, my heart pounding in my chest as I wondered what could be inside. When I finally mustered up the courage to open the package, I found a note inside, written in shaky handwriting. It was from the customer, and it was filled with more threats and warnings, telling me to watch my back because they were coming for me. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read the note, my hands trembling with fear. I knew that I had to do something, that I couldn't just sit back and wait for the customer to make good on their threats. I went to the police and filed a report, but there was little they could do without concrete evidence of a crime. They offered to assign a patrol car to keep an eye on my house, but I knew that wouldn't be enough to protect me from someone who was determined to do me harm. I started carrying pepper spray with me wherever I went, constantly looking over my shoulder and jumping at the slightest sound. I couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted, of being trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. Then, one night, as I was closing up the store, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around to see the customer standing there, their eyes filled with malice as they lunged at me with a knife. I barely had time to react, but instinct kicked in and I managed to dodge out of the way just in time. I ran as fast as I could, the customer out on my heels as we raced through the empty streets. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away from the customer before it was too late. I ducked into alleyways and side streets, doing my best to lose them in the darkness of the night. But no matter how hard I tried, the customer was always right behind me, their footsteps echoing in my ears like a death knell. I felt like a cornered animal, with nowhere left to run and no one left to turn to for help. Just when I thought all hope was lost, I stumbled upon a police patrol car parked at the end of the street. I ran towards it, shouting for help as the customer closed in on me from behind. The police sprang into action, apprehending the customer before they could do me any harm. I collapsed to the ground, my heart pounding in my chest as I realized that I had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death. So, there we were, a bunch of us friends, hiking through the thick woods of Arkansas. Just thinking it's gonna be a typical nature adventure, you know? Birds chirping, trees rustling, good times. Little did we know, we were in for something way beyond our pay grade. We started hearing rumors from locals about this preacher dude deep in the woods. Said he had this church hidden away, preaching some weird stuff. Being curious idiots, we thought, hey, why not check it out? Could be a quirky detour in our hiking plans. So, we ventured deeper, following the whispers of the woods. That's when we stumble upon this clearing, and there he is, the preacher. Tall guy, long beard, eyes that look like they've seen too much. He welcomes us like we're old pals, but there's something off, you know? Like, behind the warm smile, there's a darkness lurking. He starts preaching, talking about sins and redemption, all the typical religious stuff. But the way he's saying it, it's like he's weaving a spell, and we're falling under it. We're listening, nodding, but our minds are getting foggy. Reality starts to blur, and this feeling of unease settles in. The preacher, he's got this charisma, this magnetic pull. Next thing we know, he's telling us our sins, personal stuff we never shared. It's like he's reading our souls. We're freaking out, wondering how he knows all this. And he just keeps smiling, telling us we need his guidance to cleanse our tainted spirits. As the day goes on, we're getting more entangled in his words, like puppets on his strings. The woods, once familiar, start warping around us. Shadows dance, and every rustle feels like a sinister whisper. It's like the preacher's words are rewriting the reality we thought we knew. We try to leave, but it's like an invisible force is holding us back. Every step feels heavier, like we're sinking into the forest floor. Panic sets in, and that preacher, he's there, urging us to stay, telling us we're safer under his wing. Days pass, or maybe it's hours. Times become this hazy concept. We're losing track of ourselves, our identities slipping away. The preacher's sermons echo in our minds, drowning out our thoughts. We're not ourselves anymore. We're becoming vessels for his twisted beliefs. Then comes the breaking point. One of our friends, he starts laughing, this unsettling, maniacal laughter. It spreads like a virus, infecting us. We're all laughing, but it's not joy, it's madness. The preacher's words have cracked something inside us, and now we're spiraling into a dark abyss. We snap out of it, realizing we need to break free. The preacher's hold on us is strong, but we muster every ounce of willpower to resist. It's a struggle, like tearing ourselves from quicksand, but we manage to stumble out of that cursed clearing. As we emerge from the woods, the preacher's voice fades, but the laughter lingers. We're left questioning what was real and what was his dark influence. Okay, so I'm just this regular guy, hosting a radio show in a small town on the Great Plains. Nothing special, just spinning some tunes, chatting about the weather, you know, the usual. But things got weird real quick. One night, during my show, I started receiving these cryptic messages over the airwaves. At first, I thought it was some technical glitch or interference. But the messages, they were unnerving, whispers and distorted voices that didn't sound human. I brushed it off, thinking maybe it was just a prank or some weird atmospheric conditions. As the days went on, the messages got more specific, like they were targeting me. They mentioned things only I would know, personal stuff. It sent shivers down my spine, but I played it cool on air, pretending it was all a joke. But deep down, I was freaked out. Then, the messages took a dark turn. They started hinting at things going on in the town, things I never knew. Secrets that had been buried deep beneath the surface. It felt like the town itself was whispering its darkest confessions, and I was the unwilling recipient. I started digging, asking around, trying to make sense of the cryptic revelations. Turns out, the town had a dark underbelly, a history of corruption, cover-ups, and crimes that nobody talked about. The messages, it seemed, were pulling back the curtain on the town's dirty laundry. As I delved deeper, the town's residents got edgy. They avoided eye contact, spoke in hushed tones, like they knew I was onto something. The more I pressed, the more resistance I faced. It was like the town had a collective secret, and they were hell-bent on keeping it buried. One night, as I was broadcasting, the messages escalated. They started naming names, exposing individuals involved in the town's illicit activities. It was like the radio waves had become a weapon, tearing apart the town's facade of normalcy. Panic set in, and I could feel the tension escalating with each passing minute. I received a letter, no return address, just a bunch of newspaper clippings detailing unsolved crimes and corruption in the town. The letter hinted that my investigation was putting me in danger, that some people didn't appreciate the truth coming to light. It was a chilling warning that sent me into overdrive. The next broadcast, I spilled everything on air, the names, the crimes, the corruption. It was a Hail Mary, hoping that exposing the truth would somehow protect me. But the town, it turned on me. Phone calls flooded in, threats in the dark, warning me to back off. The cryptic messages on air changed too. They became more menacing, like they were taunting me, letting me know that I was in over my head. I couldn't sleep, paranoia gnawing at me every time I walked down the street. The town had become a trap, and I was caught in its web of lies and deceit. One night, after the broadcast, I was walking home when I felt a presence behind me. I quickened my pace, heart pounding in my chest. The footsteps grew louder, and before I knew it, someone grabbed me from behind, covering my mouth. I struggled, but a voice whispered in my ear, "Keep quiet if you want to live." They dragged me into an alley, face pressed against the cold brick wall. The dim light revealed a group of shadowy figures, their faces hidden in the darkness. They warned me to stop digging, to leave the town and never come back. It wasn't a request, it was a threat. I left town, like they wanted. Packed my bags, left a radio gig behind, and never looked back. The messages on air had stopped, but the town's dark secrets haunted me. The Great Plains, once a vast expanse of open sky, felt suffocating. I carried the weight of what I had uncovered, a burden that would stay with me forever. The small town on the Great Plains, with its friendly facade, had shown me its true face. The cryptic messages, the threats, the dark revelations, it was a wake-up call that some secrets are better left buried. The radio waves, once my medium for connecting with the town, had become a conduit for something far more sinister. As I drove away from the town, the radio tower disappearing in the rearview mirror, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows of that place would linger forever. It was a winter night, snow falling in thick flakes, covering the world in a cold, white blanket. I was home alone, cozy by the fireplace, lost in a book. The wind howled outside, creating an eerie symphony that matched the isolation of the night. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. It wasn't a regular, polite knock. It was forceful, demanding attention. I felt a chill run down my spine. Who could be knocking so aggressively on a night like this? I hesitated, debating whether to answer. The knocks continued, growing louder. Anxiety crawled up my chest, but I mustered the courage to check. I peeked through the curtains, and my heart skipped a beat. A figure stood on the doorstep, obscured by the darkness. I couldn't make out any features, just the silhouette of a person standing there. Fear gripped me, but I opened the door a crack. The stranger was a man, his face hidden beneath a hood. He seemed agitated, mumbling something about needing help. He claimed his car had broken down, and he was stranded in the cold. My instinct screamed at me to be cautious, but sympathy won over. I told him to wait while I fetched a blanket and offered to call for roadside assistance. As I turned to grab my phone, something felt off. I heard footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. I froze. Panic set in as I realized I was alone with a stranger in my home. I turned slowly, the man now standing in the doorway, his hood pulled back. His eyes were cold and calculating, sending shivers down my spine. He demanded money, claiming he needed it to get his car towed. I felt a knot in my stomach. Something wasn't right. I tried to stay calm, told him I didn't have cash but that I could call for help. He didn't like that. His demeanor shifted, becoming more aggressive. I could feel the danger in the air. His eyes darted around the room, sizing up the situation. I knew I had to act fast. I fumbled with my phone, pretending to dial for help, but he wasn't buying it. He lunged towards me, demanding my wallet. Fear propelled me into survival mode. I screamed, hoping someone nearby might hear. The struggle was chaotic, my mind racing with thoughts of escape. I managed to break free, bolting towards the door, and ran out into the frigid night. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I sprinted to the nearest neighbor's house. I banged on the door, breathless and terrified. They opened it, concern etched on their faces as I gasped out what had happened. They called the police, and I stayed huddled in their living room, waiting for help to arrive. The police searched the area, but the stranger was gone. Got my beat in the Great Smoky Mountains, doing my rounds and all. Beautiful place, you'd think, but let me tell you, it's got its dark corners. One day, I'm wandering off the marked trail, feeling adventurous. The forest is thick, trees like old guardians keeping their secrets. Something in the air feels off, like a distant hum of unease. I shake it off, thinking it's just my imagination playing tricks. As I go deeper, I stumble upon this hidden grove. There's a weird energy, like electricity buzzing in the air. And that's when I see them, a group of people, dressed in hooded robes, standing around this makeshift altar. My first thought is, what in the world? My second, I should get out of here. But curiosity, you know, it's a powerful thing. I crouch behind a tree, peeking through the leaves. They're doing some kind of ritual, chanting in a language I can't understand. The grove is adorned with symbols, like a language of its own. It's creepy, but I figure maybe it's just some weird art project. Then, they bring out this figure, bound, gagged, scared out of their mind. My heart's pounding, and I'm thinking, this is not an art project. They start doing things, unspeakable things, and I'm paralyzed with horror. I should have run, radioed for help, but fear, it's got this grip on me. I recognize the figure. It's someone from the nearby town, missing for weeks. Panic sets in, but I can't look away. These cultists, they're smiling, reveling in something sickening. And I'm thinking, I need to expose them, bring them to justice. As they finish their ritual, I start sneaking back, careful not to make a sound. My hands are shaking as I radio for backup. I explain what I've witnessed, the location, everything. Dispatch tells me they're sending help, but it'll take time. So, I go back, thinking I'll wait, keep an eye on those cultists. But they're gone, vanished like ghosts. I'm left standing in that grove, feeling the weight of what I've seen. I can't get the image out of my head, the rituals, the terrified victim. As I wait for backup, I notice symbols carved into the trees, warnings, maybe. The cult's way of saying, we know you were here. Fear gnaws at me. What if they come after me? What if they're watching? Backup arrives, and we search the grove, find remnants of their ritual. But no cultists, no victim. It's like they were never there. I try to explain, but words fumble out, and I feel this sense of helplessness. Days pass, and I'm haunted by that grove. I start noticing hooded figures in the shadows, but every time I turn, they're gone. Sleep eludes me, nightmares taunt me. The cult, it's like a phantom, lurking in the periphery of my reality. I try telling others, but they dismiss it as stress, as trauma. I question my own sanity. Maybe it was a hallucination, a twisted dream in the daylight. But deep down, I know what I saw, and it's etched into my soul like a scar. Now, every rustle in the trees, every whisper of the wind, it echoes with that cult's chant. I'm a ranger, sworn to protect these woods, but how do you protect against something that hides in the shadows, something that feels like a nightmare you can't wake up from? I worked in this office for years, just another face in the sea of cubicles. Nothing ever stood out, just the usual office chatter and the hum of fluorescent lights. Until those notes started appearing on my desk. At first, I thought they were harmless. Anonymous little messages tucked among the papers, like cryptic love notes. But as I read, my stomach churned. These notes knew too much, details about my personal life, my daily routine, things only someone close could know. I kept glancing around the office, wondering who was watching me. The notes were like whispers in the shadows, revealing secrets I hadn't shared with anyone. The first one mentioned what I had for breakfast, and I laughed it off, thinking it was a strange coincidence. But the notes kept coming, each one delving deeper into my life. The messages became more unsettling, mentioning my evening walks, the names of my family members, and even the color of my bedroom walls. I felt exposed, like someone had torn down the walls of my privacy. I couldn't concentrate on work, constantly checking over my shoulder, paranoid eyes scanning the office. Days turned into weeks, and the notes continued. They found their way into my lunchbox, my coat pocket, even taped to the bottom of my coffee mug. My nerves were shot. Who could be doing this, and why? My colleagues seemed oblivious, engrossed in their own worlds. One day, the note hinted at a secret I'd never shared with anyone, a buried guilt from my past. Panic set in. How could someone know this? It was a ghost from my past, a skeleton I never intended to reveal. The note wasn't just a violation, it was a haunting manifestation of my deepest fears. I started isolating myself, avoiding eye contact with colleagues, suspecting everyone. The once familiar faces now seemed like strangers, potential spies in this twisted game. My work suffered, but I couldn't focus. The office, once a place of routine, had transformed into a maze of paranoia. I considered talking to HR but hesitated. What if they were involved? The notes hinted at a level of access that was impossible without an insider. My mind was a battleground, torn between confronting the source and protecting my own sanity. One day, after a particularly ominous note, I decided to confront the issue head-on. I stayed late, pretending to work, waiting for any sign of movement. The office, usually deserted after hours, felt like a haunted labyrinth. As the clock ticked, I heard footsteps. My heart raced as a figure emerged from the shadows, a colleague I had never suspected. His eyes were cold, devoid of any empathy. He held the latest note, a sinister grin on his face. He reveled in revealing my vulnerabilities, relishing my discomfort. The confrontation was tense, a battle of wills between the violated and the violator. His motives were unclear, a mix of resentment and a desire for control. I reported the incident to HR, and an internal investigation ensued. It turned out he harbored a grudge, a twisted need for power over his colleagues. The notes were his sick attempt at asserting dominance, a psychological game that left me scarred. In the aftermath, the atmosphere in the office remained tense. Colleagues exchanged wary glances, trust shattered by the actions of one. There we were, pumped up for Coachella. Me and the gang, ready to dive into the music, the vibes, you know, the whole shebang. We've been looking forward to this for ages. The festival grounds were massive, people from all walks of life converging to celebrate music. We were soaking it all in, going from stage to stage, dancing like nobody was watching. The atmosphere was electric. As the sun set, the neon lights took over, and the headliners hit the main stage. It was pure magic. But in the midst of all this euphoria, something felt off. A weird energy that you couldn't quite put your finger on. In the sea of faces, we started noticing a group that seemed out of place. Dressed in dark clothes, they weren't there for the music. They were there for something else. As we moved through the crowd, they seemed to follow. Paranoia? Maybe. But it felt real. We changed direction, and they'd adjust their course, like they had their eyes on us. We decided to test it out. Went to the food stalls, took a detour through the art installations, but they were always there. Watching. Waiting. Our excitement turned into unease. Then, at the quieter edges of the festival, away from the pulsating beats, we saw them huddled together, exchanging something that didn't look like festival merchandise. It was like they had their own agenda within this sea of celebration. Curiosity got the better of us. We decided to eavesdrop, act like we were just chilling nearby. The bits we caught were chilling, whispers about a plan, a meet-up, something happening after the festival. A whole other layer to this party we didn't sign up for. As the night wore on, we noticed more of them blending in. It wasn't just a few, it was a network, a web, each person with a role in whatever scheme they were cooking up. Our group tried to stay inconspicuous, but it felt like we were being herded into a trap. It was like a horror movie, and we were the unsuspecting cast. Midnight approached, and the festival grounds took on a surreal vibe. The neon lights, once enchanting, now seemed ominous. The group we'd been tailing started moving with purpose, converging near the exit. That's when we made the call, ditch the festival, get out before whatever was about to unfold. We weren't sticking around to find out their endgame. We maneuvered through the crowd, avoided their gazes, and slipped away. As we left the festival behind, we saw a convoy of unmarked vans pulling up, the shady group ushering people inside. We made it to safety, but the night was marred by the realization that beneath the pulsating music and the carefree festival atmosphere, there was something sinister at play. What were they planning? What kind of twisted after-party did we narrowly escape? We never found out the answers, but Coachella, for us, was forever tainted. The music may have been the headline, but that hidden agenda, lurking just beneath the surface, left us with an unforgettable horror story instead of cherished festival memories. Emily and I thought a cross-country skiing trip in Vermont would be a romantic getaway. The snow-covered landscape was serene, the air biting. We hit the trails, hoping for some alone time. Little did we know, things were going to get dark real quick. As we glided through the snowy woods, we spotted a group of skiers. They looked out of place, wearing dark clothes that seemed to blend with the shadows. They didn't look like your typical outdoor enthusiasts. We decided to steer clear, not wanting any trouble. But they noticed us, and that's when things got weird. They started following, shadows in the snow. We tried to shake them off, take different trails, but they persisted. Panic set in, and we realized we were being hunted in the isolated winter terrain. We picked up our pace, but they matched it effortlessly. Emily kept looking over her shoulder, fear etched on her face. I felt a knot in my stomach, the kind that tightens when you know something's not right. The snowy woods that seemed magical turned into a maze of danger. We decided to confront them, ask why they were tailing us. But as we turned to face them, they just stared, emotionless. It sent shivers down our spines. We skied away, heartbeats echoing in the silent winter air. But they didn't give up. As the sun dipped below the trees, the woods became a chilling labyrinth. The shadows of the pursuing skiers danced around us, and we could feel the isolation closing in. Emily kept saying we should call for help, but there was no signal out there. We were on our own. We skied faster, desperation setting in. The strangers behind us seemed to multiply, a relentless force in the frigid wilderness. We took a wrong turn, and the woods became denser. Panic surged as we realized we were lost in the snowy expanse. The strangers closed in, their presence sending waves of dread. Emily and I didn't speak, we just skied, hoping for an escape. But the woods seemed to stretch endlessly, the cold becoming more biting with every passing minute. Fear hung heavy in the air. We stumbled upon a clearing, and for a moment, we thought we were safe. But the strangers surrounded us, their ski poles held like weapons. It was a standoff in the freezing silence. They didn't say a word, just stared at us with those cold eyes. The situation escalated. They demanded our belongings, our skis, everything. It wasn't just about robbery, it was about power, dominance in the desolate winter landscape. We handed over what we could, the cold air cutting through our fear. They left us stranded in the clearing, our ski tracks disappearing in the snow. We were alone, miles from civilization, with no gear in the freezing darkness. The strangers melted back into the woods, leaving us with a haunting realization. The snowy trails we thought would be our escape had become a trap, and the isolated winter terrain held a darkness we never saw coming. I was working alone at the bar. I heard a noise coming from the back of the bar. I thought it might be one of the kegs acting up, so I went to check it out. But as I got closer, the noise stopped, and I couldn't see anything out of place. I shrugged it off and went back to my work. But as I was finishing up, I heard the noise again, this time closer. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I called out, asking if anyone was there, but there was no response. I started to feel uneasy, like I was being watched. Just then, I saw a shadow move out of the corner of my eye. I turned, expecting to see a coworker playing a prank on me, but there was no one there. I could feel my heart racing, and I knew that something wasn't right. I tried to tell myself that I was just being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing there. A few minutes later, I heard the noise again, this time coming from right behind me. I spun around, and that's when I saw him. There was a man standing in the shadows, watching me with cold, unblinking eyes. I could feel a surge of panic rising in my chest. I asked him what he was doing there, but he didn't respond. He just kept staring at me with this intense, unsettling gaze. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck standing on end, and I knew that I had to get out of there. I turned and ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear his footsteps behind me, getting closer and closer. I didn't know what he wanted, but I knew that I had to find a way to escape. I made it to the front of the bar and out into the parking lot. I could see my car in the distance, and I ran towards it as fast as my legs would carry me. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking with fear. As I finally got the door open and jumped inside, I saw the man emerge from the shadows. I started the car and peeled out of the parking lot, not daring to look back. We were two friends, Mike and I, driving through the countryside on our way back home. It was getting late, and Mike, always up for an adventure, suggested a shortcut. We took this isolated road, a decision that would lead to the most terrifying night of our lives. The road narrowed, and the trees seemed to close in, casting these eerie shadows in the fading light. But we were enjoying the ride, laughing and joking, until we hit a patch of mud. The car skidded, and before we knew it, we were stuck, wheels spinning and sinking deeper into the mire. We tried to get the car out, pushing and digging, but it was no use. Night was falling fast, and the darkness seemed to swallow us whole. We decided to wait for help, hoping someone would pass by soon. As we sat there, the silence felt suffocating, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind. It felt like we were the only souls for miles around, this eerie isolation that made my skin crawl. Mike tried to lighten the mood, cracking jokes and playing music on his phone. But despite his efforts, a sense of unease lingered in the air, this feeling that something wasn't right. The night grew darker, and that's when things started to get weird. We heard strange noises, like whispers carried by the wind. At first, we dismissed it as the sound of the trees, but these whispers seemed to be calling our names. I felt this chill down my spine, this sense of being watched. I glanced around, but there was nothing there, just the darkness and the trees. Then, the car's headlights flickered, casting these unsettling shadows around us. Mike checked the engine, but everything seemed fine. It was this fear creeping in, this sense that something was playing with us. As we sat there, the air grew colder, this biting cold that seemed to seep into our bones. Mike joked about ghosts, but deep down, I couldn't shake off this feeling of dread. We both saw it, this figure in the distance, a shadowy silhouette that seemed to dart between the trees. Mike laughed it off, said it was probably an animal, but I knew it wasn't. There was something sinister about that shadow, this fear that it was watching us, waiting. The whispers grew louder, this haunting sound that seemed to echo all around us. Mike tried to block it out with music, but even that didn't drown out the eerie voices that seemed to call to us from the darkness. Then, the car radio crackled to life, this static noise that made us both jump. It was this garbled voice, this strange language that sent shivers down my spine. We turned it off, but the static continued, this relentless noise that added to our growing fear. I looked out the window, and for a moment, I thought I saw faces in the trees, these twisted, contorted faces that vanished as quickly as they appeared. Mike laughed it off, said it was just our imagination, but I knew what I saw. We both felt this overwhelming sense of dread, this fear that we were not alone, that something malevolent lurked in the darkness. We locked the doors, huddled inside the car, trying to ward off this growing terror. Time seemed to crawl, this endless night that refused to end. Every little sound made us jump, this fear that it might be something lurking just beyond our sight. Then, headlights approached in the distance, a car coming down the road. Relief flooded through us, this hope that help had finally arrived. But as the car got closer, we realized it wasn't a rescue team. It was this old, beaten-up vehicle, and the driver, there was something off about him. He stopped near us, this eerie grin on his face. He said he'd help us, but his voice was this strange, raspy whisper that made my skin crawl. Mike hesitated, but before we could react, the man vanished into the darkness. We waited, this unease settling in as the minutes turned into hours. Help never came, and the whispers, the strange noises, they continued. I tried to call for help on my phone, but there was no signal, just this eerie silence that seemed to envelope us. Then, just as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The whispers ceased, the shadows retreated, and the night felt quiet once more. We saw headlights in the distance again, this time a rescue team that had finally found us. We were saved, but that night, those eerie occurrences, they stayed with us. I was on a business trip, staying at this upscale hotel. Everything seemed fine at first, a routine check-in, a standard room, and a busy schedule ahead. But then things took a turn. I received a call from the hotel reception, asking me to come down urgently. They said they needed to discuss a security issue regarding my stay. I was puzzled but made my way to the lobby. The hotel manager greeted me, looking visibly concerned. They explained that there had been a data breach in their system and that personal information, including mine, had been compromised. It hit me like a punch. I felt exposed, vulnerable. They assured me they were taking measures to rectify the situation, but the damage was done. I felt this unsettling fear, this sense of invasion of my privacy. They said they'd keep me updated, and I went back to my room, trying to shake off the unease. That night, as I returned from dinner, I found my room in disarray. Drawers were open, papers were scattered, and my laptop seemed tampered with. I froze, feeling this chill crawl up my spine. I knew something wasn't right. I checked my belongings, trying to figure out if anything was missing, but it all seemed intact. It was eerie, this feeling of someone having been in my room, rifling through my things. I went to the front desk, telling them what happened, but they dismissed it, saying it was probably just housekeeping. But I knew it wasn't. There was this unsettling feeling that someone had targeted me after the data breach. The following days, strange things started happening. I received mysterious calls with heavy breathing on the other end, making my heart race every time the phone rang. I tried blocking the numbers, but they kept coming from different ones. Then, I started noticing someone following me. It was subtle at first, just glimpses of someone shadowing me from a distance. But it kept happening, this feeling of being watched wherever I went. I felt this constant fear, this sense of being stalked and targeted. I tried to reason with myself, telling myself it was paranoia, but the evidence was there, the feeling of being hunted. One evening, I returned to my room to find a note slipped under my door. It was chilling. It contained details about my personal life, things only someone with access to my information would know. It made my blood run cold, this feeling of being violated and threatened. I called the hotel staff again, but they seemed indifferent, brushing it off as a misunderstanding or someone's prank. But it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like someone was tormenting me, using my stolen information against me. I couldn't sleep, feeling this constant anxiety and fear. Every noise outside my door felt threatening, every phone call a potential threat. I was on edge, unable to trust anyone, not knowing who was behind this torment. I considered leaving the hotel, but I didn't feel safe anywhere. I felt trapped, this feeling of being targeted and hunted, with no way out. The situation escalated when I received a package addressed to my room. Inside were photos of me taken without my knowledge in various places around the hotel. It felt invasive, this violation of my privacy. I called the police, explaining everything, but without concrete evidence, they said there was little they could do. I felt this overwhelming sense of helplessness, this fear that I was alone in this nightmare. I decided to check out, to leave that place behind. But as I was packing, I heard someone trying to open my door. I froze, feeling this surge of panic, and I barricaded myself inside, not knowing what to do. I called for help, but no one came. I heard footsteps outside, someone trying to force their way in. It was terrifying, this feeling of being trapped and vulnerable. Eventually, the noise stopped, and I cautiously opened the door, finding the hallway empty. I rushed out, leaving everything behind, not looking back. I reported everything to the police, but they couldn't find any leads. I felt this lingering fear, this trauma from the terrifying encounters, this feeling of being hunted and targeted because of the breach of my personal information. So, I'm this guy who loves solo adventures, and I thought joining a snowshoeing group in Lake Louise, Canada, would be a cool way to meet people. Winter, snow-covered landscapes seemed like a dream. But that dream was about to turn into a bone-chilling nightmare. The group seemed normal at first, just people gathered for a winter excursion. We strapped on our snowshoes, the crisp air hitting our faces. I was excited, thinking it would be a fun day exploring the snowy wilderness. Little did I know, the other participants had something darker in mind. As we trudged through the snow-covered trails, I noticed strange glances and hushed conversations among the group. It felt like they had some hidden agenda, and the festive winter landscape became a backdrop to their ominous intentions. I tried to shake off the unease, thinking maybe I was just being paranoid. But as we ventured deeper into the frozen expanse, things took a turn. The group started deviating from the marked trails, leading us into a more isolated area. I questioned the change, but they brushed it off, claiming it was a shortcut to a scenic spot. The winter wilderness, once inviting, now felt like a trap closing in on me. The unease grew, and I realized I was alone in a group with unknown intentions. The snowy landscape, so peaceful at first, seemed to harbor a hidden danger. I decided to keep my guard up, aware that something was off about this seemingly innocent snowshoeing excursion. As we reached a more secluded part of the trail, the group's behavior became more unsettling. Whispers turned into outright threats, and it became clear they had a sinister plan. Fear gripped me as I realized I had walked into a situation I couldn't control. The snowy landscape, once a winter wonderland, became a stage for a chilling confrontation. I tried to distance myself from the group, but they closed in, their intentions becoming more apparent. It was like a nightmare unfolding in the freezing cold. The snowshoes that were supposed to carry me through a winter adventure now felt like shackles, trapping me in a hostile situation. As the confrontation escalated, I realized I had to make a move. I broke away from the group, running through the snow-covered trees. The cold air burned my lungs, and the fear of the unknown fueled my adrenaline. It was a desperate attempt to escape the chilling situation. The group pursued, their threats cutting through the biting wind. The winter landscape, once serene, turned into a chaotic battleground. I navigated through the snow-covered terrain, the trees offering me fleeting moments of cover. The isolation of Lake Louise became both a refuge and a curse. Hours passed, and I managed to find my way back to the marked trails. The group had given up the pursuit, but the fear lingered. I reported the chilling encounter to the authorities, but the mystery of the group with dark intentions haunted me. The snowy wilderness, once a symbol of adventure, now held a sinister secret. The solo snowshoeing excursion that started with excitement turned into a harrowing tale. The frozen landscape, once an inviting playground, became a chilling reminder that human intentions can turn a winter adventure into a confrontation with darkness. I was out in Death Valley, California, seeking the thrill of adventure amidst the vast expanse of sand dunes. The scorching sun beat down on the desert, making the air shimmer with relentless heat. I trudged through the shifting sands, each step an effort under the relentless sun. As I ventured deeper into the dunes, the solitude became both my companion and my challenge. The vast emptiness seemed to stretch endlessly, and the silence was only broken by the distant howl of the wind. I embraced the solitude, reveling in the freedom of the desert, until I stumbled upon something that shattered the tranquility. A makeshift camp appeared in the distance, camouflaged amidst the dunes. An odd assortment of tents and tarpaulins blended into the sandy landscape. My curiosity got the better of me, prompting me to investigate the mysterious encampment. Approaching cautiously, I noticed movement, shadows shifting against the sun-bleached canvas. Fear gnawed at my gut, but I pressed on, drawn by an inexplicable urge to understand the secrets concealed within the camp. As I neared, hushed voices became audible. They spoke in low tones, a language I couldn't discern. The tension in the air was palpable. My pulse quickened as I observed the group, a motley assembly of individuals with eyes that held a mixture of suspicion and desperation. I hesitated, contemplating whether to retreat or continue my inadvertent intrusion. But before I could decide, the group noticed me. A collective gaze fixed upon my solitary figure, and the air became charged with an uneasy energy. I raised my hands in a feeble attempt to convey harmlessness, but the tension escalated. They spoke hurriedly among themselves, glances exchanged like a silent conspiracy unfolding before my eyes. It was then I realized I had stumbled upon something more than a nomadic camp in the desert. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, their features obscured by the harsh sunlight. A leader, perhaps. Their stern expression bore witness to a life hardened by adversity. The group's intentions were unclear, but the atmosphere hinted at a threat lingering beneath the surface. An awkward standoff ensued, neither party fully comprehending the other's motives. My mind raced, grappling with the potential dangers that loomed in this remote desert encounter. The desert, once a symbol of boundless freedom, now felt like a trap closing in. The leader, with a nod to the others, approached me cautiously. Communication faltered in the language barrier, and gestures became the only means of understanding. It was an unnerving dance, two parties navigating the delicate balance between curiosity and wariness. As minutes stretched into an eternity, a decision seemed imminent. The group, while not overtly aggressive, exuded an aura of secrecy and caution. My instinct screamed at me to retreat, to escape this uncertain predicament, but the vastness of Death Valley offered no refuge. In a tense moment, the leader signaled for me to leave. It was a silent command, an unspoken warning to unravel myself from the web of uncertainty. As I retreated, glancing back over my shoulder, the makeshift camp disappeared into the undulating dunes, a mirage in the vastness of the desert, concealing its enigmatic secrets beneath the relentless sun. The encounter lingered in my thoughts as I continued through the ever-shifting landscape. It was one of those bitterly cold nights when the snow blankets everything, muffling sounds and making the world feel strangely quiet. I was on the night shift, just another paramedic responding to emergencies in the biting chill. The radio crackled with a call about a possible heart attack in an old house on the outskirts of town. Sounded routine, just another night. The dispatcher warned about the snowstorm, but duty called, and I drove through the swirling snowflakes. The wind howled, making the journey eerie, like I was moving through a frozen ghost town. The GPS led me to this isolated, dilapidated house, standing silent against the relentless storm. There was an otherworldly hush as I approached the front door. The porch light flickered, barely holding onto life. The wind seemed to whisper through the cracks in the wood, making the whole place feel like it was holding its breath. I hesitated before knocking, the sound echoing strangely in the stillness. No response. I knocked again, louder this time, but the only answer was the creaking of the house in the wind. It felt abandoned, forgotten, like a relic from a bygone era. Yet, the call had come from here. My instincts tingled, that uneasy feeling crawling up my spine. With a deep breath, I tried the doorknob. Surprisingly, it turned, and the door creaked open. Cold air swept through the entryway, and a musty smell hit me. I stepped inside, the dim glow of my flashlight revealing a scene frozen in time. The furniture was draped in dusty sheets, like the occupants had left in a hurry, or never returned. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and the air hung heavy with neglect. I called out, my voice swallowed by the vast emptiness of the house. I followed the sound of a faint moan, my boots echoing in the empty halls. The flashlight danced across faded wallpaper and peeling paint, creating eerie shadows that played tricks on my mind. Every step felt like a whisper in the haunted silence of that frozen domain. I reached the staircase, the wood groaning under my weight. The moan grew louder, leading me to a door ajar. I pushed it open, revealing a room steeped in darkness. The flashlight revealed a figure lying on a bed, tangled in sheets, their face contorted in pain. The patient was conscious but incoherent, mumbling words that made no sense. My eyes, however, were drawn to something else. The walls were adorned with photographs, not family portraits, but gruesome images of lifeless bodies. Panic gripped me as I realized these weren't staged, they were real. A sickening realization settled in my stomach. I stumbled back, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The person on the bed wasn't the victim, they were the perpetrator. The emergency call was a trap, drawing me into this macabre display. I fumbled for my radio, my voice shaking as I called for backup. The moans from the bed now felt like a sinister melody, the snowstorm outside muffling the approaching sirens. I kept my eyes on the patient, fear and disbelief warring within me. As the backup arrived, the truth unfolded. This seemingly abandoned house was a chamber of horrors, a grotesque stage where the lines between victim and villain blurred. I'm just a guy who drives a truck. Been on the road for ages, crisscrossing the country, hauling goods from one place to another. It's a simple life, or at least it used to be, until that fateful night in the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. I had a routine, you know. Hit the road early, drive for hours, take my breaks at lonely rest areas. But that night, I found myself on an unfamiliar route. A shortcut, they said. Little did I know, it would lead me straight into the heart of something sinister. As I navigated the winding roads, the forest seemed to swallow me whole. The trees loomed like shadows, and the darkness clung to the air. There was this eerie silence, broken only by the hum of my engine. That's when I saw them, a convoy of trucks, parked in a clearing, their headlights cutting through the darkness. I thought maybe it was a trucker meetup, a pit stop for the night. But as I approached, the air turned heavy with tension. These weren't regular truckers. They were a gang, a band of road drivers with a look in their eyes that sent shivers down my spine. I parked a bit away, trying to keep to myself. But they noticed me, and one of them, a burly guy with a menacing grin, approached. He asked about my rig, my cargo, all the usual trucker talk. But his eyes told a different story, like he was sizing me up for something more. As I chatted, I noticed the others eyeing me, whispering among themselves. It felt like I stumbled into a world where the rules weren't written on the road signs. The burly guy, let's call him Redbeard, invited me to join their crew for the night. Something about a brotherhood, a tight-knit group of truckers helping each other out. I was hesitant, but curiosity got the better of me. Little did I know, it was the beginning of a descent into hell. They led me to a makeshift camp, deep in the woods. The atmosphere was thick with smoke from a crackling fire. I noticed a sense of camaraderie, but beneath it, an undercurrent of something darker. They offered me a drink, a toast to brotherhood, they said. As I took a sip, I started feeling woozy. The world spun, and my senses dulled. That's when Redbeard revealed their initiation ritual. They called it the Road's Embrace. A twisted ceremony where newcomers prove their worthiness by enduring a night in the woods, hunted by the seasoned members. I tried to protest, but my voice was a mere whisper. They stripped me of my keys, leaving me defenseless in the forest's grip. Panic set in as they released me into the darkness, laughing like hyenas. The forest became a labyrinth of nightmares. I stumbled through the underbrush, every rustle of leaves sending my heart into overdrive. Shadows danced in the periphery, and I felt the weight of unseen eyes watching my every move. Time lost its meaning as I ran, my breath ragged, my senses heightened by fear. Snap! A twig broke behind me. I dared not look back, knowing that whatever hunted me was relentless. Eventually, exhaustion caught up, and I collapsed against a tree. The night seemed endless, the darkness swallowing me whole. That's when I heard footsteps closing in. My heart pounded as I realized they found me. The gang emerged from the shadows, their eyes glinting with a mixture of amusement and triumph. Redbeard patted me on the back, congratulating me on surviving the initiation. I was in, part of their twisted brotherhood. As I stumbled back to my truck, I couldn't shake the feeling that I stepped into a nightmare. The forest, once a sanctuary, now held the echoes of their twisted rituals. I drove away, leaving the haunting darkness of the Pacific Northwest behind me. The road stretched ahead, but the memory of that night clung to my soul. The woods, the gang, the initiation, a chapter of horror etched into my life as a lone trucker. And as the miles rolled by, I couldn't escape the chilling truth that the road I traveled had secrets darker than the shadows in the Pacific Northwest forest. I was home alone, my roommate out of town for the weekend, leaving me to fend for myself in the midst of the raging storm. As I sat on the couch, watching the rain lash against the windows, my phone buzzed with a new message. I glanced at the screen, expecting to see a text from a friend or family member checking in on me. But instead, I saw a message from an unknown number, the words ominous and threatening. My heart pounded in my chest as I read the message, my hands trembling as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Who could be sending me such terrifying messages, and why? I tried to brush off the message as just a prank or a wrong number, but deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over me like a dark cloud. I felt like I was being watched, like someone was lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the storm raged on outside, the power flickered and went out, plunging the house into darkness. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my phone, the only source of light in the pitch-black room. But as I turned on the flashlight and cast its feeble glow around the room, I realized that I was not alone. I could feel eyes on me, watching my every move from the darkness, and I knew that I had to find a way out before it was too late. I tried to call for help, to reach out to someone, anyone, who could come to my aid. But the storm had knocked out the phone lines, leaving me stranded and helpless in the darkness. Desperation gnawed at my insides as I searched for a way out, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to ignore the feeling of dread that washed over me like a tidal wave. I knew that I had to find a way to escape, to get out of this nightmare before it consumed me whole. I stumbled through the darkness, my footsteps echoing off the walls as I searched for a way out. But every door I tried was locked tight, trapping me inside with whatever lurked in the shadows. And then, just as all hope seemed lost, I heard a noise, a soft, sinister sound that sent shivers down my spine. I froze in place, my breath catching in my throat as I strained to listen for any more sounds. But the noise came again, closer this time, and I knew that I had to act fast if I wanted to survive. With trembling hands, I reached for the nearest weapon, a heavy candlestick that sat on the mantel, and held it tightly in my grasp. As the footsteps drew nearer, I braced myself for whatever horror awaited me in the darkness. But just as the figure stepped into the feeble light of my flashlight, I saw a glimmer of recognition in their eyes, a glimmer of humanity that sent a wave of relief coursing through my veins. It was my neighbor, their face twisted in fear and confusion as they stumbled towards me. They had heard my cries for help and had come to investigate, their own home plunged into darkness by the storm. Together, we managed to find our way out of the house and into the safety of the stormy night. As we huddled together outside, the rain pounding down around us, I couldn't help but feel grateful for their presence, their bravery in the face of danger. We were excited for our camping trip, eager to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and immerse ourselves in the tranquility of nature. But as we ventured deeper into the remote forest, a sense of unease began to settle over us. The dense canopy overhead cast the forest floor in shadow, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the only sounds were the rustle of leaves in the wind and the distant calls of birds. But as night fell and we settled into our campsite, our sense of peace was shattered by the chilling howls of wolves echoing through the trees. We knew that wolves inhabited these woods, but we never expected to encounter them so up close and personal. Fear gripped us as we realized that we were being stalked by a pack of predators, hungry and relentless in their pursuit. We huddled together, our hearts pounding in our chests as we listened to the wolves circling our camp, their eyes glowing in the darkness. But we knew that we couldn't stay put and wait for the wolves to make their move. With adrenaline coursing through our veins, we sprang into action, grabbing whatever makeshift weapons we could find and preparing to defend ourselves against the relentless onslaught. As the wolves closed in, we fought with all our strength, swinging wildly at the snarling beasts as they lunged for us with bared teeth and razor-sharp claws. The air was filled with the sound of our shouts and the growls of the wolves, a chaotic symphony of fear and desperation. But despite our best efforts, the wolves seemed to be everywhere at once, their numbers overwhelming us as they continued to press the attack. We knew that we had to find a way out of this nightmare, to escape the forest and reach safety before it was too late. With no other option, we fled into the darkness, our hearts pounding in our chests as we raced through the trees, the wolves hot on our heels. We stumbled and fell, our bodies battered and bruised, but we refused to give up hope. Through sheer determination and grit, we managed to outpace the wolves and find our way back to civilization, bruised and bloody but alive. The memory of that harrowing night would haunt us for years to come, a reminder of the dangers that lurked in the wilderness and the strength of the human spirit in the face of adversity. We thought it would be just another fun night at the beach, a casual bonfire to cap off the summer. A group of friends, the sound of crashing waves, and the warmth of the flames dancing in the night. Little did we know, the sands of the Outer Banks held secrets darker than the night itself. As the fire crackled and the laughter echoed, we noticed shadows moving in the periphery. We dismissed it at first, attributing it to the flickering flames playing tricks on our eyes. But the unease lingered, a subtle discomfort that crept into the air. Curiosity got the better of us. We wandered beyond the circle of light, venturing into the darkness that stretched along the shoreline. And there, hidden among the dunes, we stumbled upon a gathering of figures, shrouded in secrecy. They huddled together, speaking in hushed tones, their faces obscured by the night. Fear knotted in our stomachs as we realized we'd unwittingly intruded on something beyond our understanding. A clandestine meeting that reeked of conspiracy. We contemplated retreating, pretending we hadn't seen, but the gravity of the situation held us in place. Their conversation, barely audible whispers carried by the wind, hinted at something ominous. We strained to catch fragments of sentences, words like betrayal, retribution, and consequences. The bonfire, once a beacon of warmth, now flickered in the face of an unseen threat. As we stood paralyzed by the shadows, one of them glanced our way. The realization that we were now alone in the darkness sent a chill down our spines. They knew we were there, intruders in their clandestine world. Panic set in, and we stumbled backward, crashing into each other in the dim light. The figures emerged from the shadows, their faces now visible in the wavering glow of the bonfire. Stern expressions bore down on us, eyes filled with a mix of anger and determination. We were caught in the crossfire of a situation we couldn't comprehend. A tense silence enveloped the beach as the two groups faced off, ours, a gathering of friends caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, and theirs, a mysterious assembly with motives shrouded in darkness. The air crackled with an impending storm, both literal and metaphorical. With a sudden, unexpected intensity, the leader of the clandestine group stepped forward. A tall figure with piercing eyes that seemed to see through the veil of our confusion. He spoke, a low and measured voice that carried the weight of authority. He demanded our silence, our pledge to forget what we had witnessed. As the words hung in the air, we felt the gravity of the situation closing in. The bonfire, once a symbol of camaraderie, now flickered with an uncertain fate. The night air, heavy with tension, bore witness to a confrontation that transcended the boundaries of our understanding. The leader's gaze locked onto each of us, as if searching for signs of defiance. We hesitated, caught in the grip of fear and uncertainty. And then, with a subtle nod, he signaled to his followers, and they retreated into the shadows as silently as they had appeared. Left alone on the beach, we exchanged wary glances. The bonfire, now reduced to embers, reflected the uncertainty that lingered in our hearts. The night, once promising laughter and friendship, had morphed into an encounter with the inexplicable. We stood there, grappling with the aftermath of a night that defied logic. The clandestine figures vanished into the darkness, leaving us with unanswered questions and a newfound awareness of the hidden currents that ebbed and flowed beneath the surface of the Outer Banks. As we dispersed, the weight of the encounter clung to us like the salt in the sea breeze. The beach, once a carefree escape, now held a story untold, a narrative of shadows and whispers that would haunt our memories long after the last embers of the bonfire had faded away. Me and my buddies thought a camping trip to Yosemite would be the bomb. You know, getting away from the city, enjoying the great outdoors, typical stuff. We found this sweet spot, or at least we thought so at first. We set up camp near this group of people, didn't think much of it at the beginning. They seemed like your regular outdoorsy folks. But as night crept in, things got weird. Real weird. First off, they had this constant huddle going on, whispering like they were plotting the heist of the century or something. Every now and then, one of them would stare in our direction, a sinister glint in their eyes. I shrugged it off, told myself I was just being paranoid. Then, we started hearing these muffled arguments, voices rising, tempers flaring. It was like they were at each other's throats, but trying to keep it under wraps. Red flags, right? But we were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by trees and shadows that swallowed any rational thought. As we gathered around the campfire, we noticed them watching us. Not the casual glance, but a predatory stare. Like we were the prey and they were sizing us up. It made my skin crawl, but I didn't want to ruin the vibe, you know? Later, when we hit the tents, I overheard their conversations. They were planning something, and it wasn't marshmallow roasting techniques. They kept mentioning our camp, talking about how easy it would be to take what we had. I nudged my friends awake, told them something was off. We decided to stay alert, keeping an eye on those shady neighbors. It felt like we were on some reality show, only the stakes were way higher than a cash prize. Midnight struck, and that's when things hit the fan. We heard footsteps around our campsite, soft whispers riding on the night breeze. Panic set in. We couldn't just pack up and leave. The darkness had swallowed the path back. We huddled together, clutching whatever makeshift weapons we could find, flashlights, tent poles, you name it. The rustling intensified, shadows danced on the edges of our flickering fire. My heart pounded in my chest like a drum in a horror movie soundtrack. Then, silence. Complete and utter silence. It felt like the whole forest was holding its breath. We strained our ears, but nothing. No footsteps, no whispers, just an oppressive stillness. Morning came, and the neighboring campsite was deserted. No trace of the ominous group, like they were ghosts in the night. We packed up in record time, leaving Yosemite behind without a backward glance. On the way out, we ran into a park ranger. We spilled the beans, told him about our creepy neighbors and the close encounter with whatever they had in mind. The ranger's face darkened, and he assured us they'd look into it. We left Yosemite with a story to tell, one that still sends shivers down my spine. We were naive campers, stumbling into the web of something sinister. Who knows what those people wanted, our gear, a sick joke, or something more nefarious? One thing's for sure, though, Yosemite, with its towering trees and majestic cliffs, hides more than breathtaking views. It harbors secrets, shadows that dance with intentions darker than the night. And we, unsuspecting campers, almost became part of that enigmatic horror.